Okay, good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the 2020 Town of Barrington Deliberative Session. The first and most fun part of our two-part town meeting. Today we'll discuss and potentially amend the warrant articles which will appear on the ballot to be voted on March 10th. And before we get started, for safety's sake, I should point out the exits. They're the doors that say exit above them. There's one over there and one over there that go directly outside. Those over there go out into the hall. Do not go through those doors back here. Those go into the middle school locker rooms. You don't want to go there. Okay, before Barrington adopted the official ballot referendum system of town meetings, sometimes referred to as SB2 in the late 1990s, Barrington held traditional town meetings at which town officers were elected and warrant articles were debated and voted on all in the same day, which sometimes stretched into the next day. According to the 1972 town report, and I'm sure you've all read that, right? I was reading it last weekend. The polls opened for voting on 3 warrant articles at 10 a.m. and closed at 6:30 p.m. Discussion of the other articles began at 7:30. The big item was Article 2 to see what sum the town would raise and appropriate to build, equip, and furnish a town hall, which is that green building up on Ramsdale Lane where the library is. This article, which included the issuance of bonds, had to be voted on by ballot, but it hadn't been included in the town ballot. So the polls were opened again at 8:30, closed at 10:30, reopened at 10:33 for 2 additional people, and reclosed at 10:34. Voters approved the deluxe building option, which included partitions and plumbing, for $135,000 by a vote of 181 to 57. Voters finished with the 32 articles just in time to adjourn at midnight. With the hope of keeping this meeting less than 14 hours, I propose the following rules of order for the deliberative session. The purpose of these simple rules of order is to promote an efficient examination of the articles on the warrant and to give the voters in attendance the opportunity to express their opinions about the articles. Number 1, the moderator follows no set rules of order. Voters have the right to challenge the moderator's rules and rulings. I hope you won't feel the need to do that, but you can. Number 2, only registered voters, the town attorney, and town employees will be allowed to speak. Non-resident department heads include the town planner, the library director, the tax collector, and the police chief. And I don't see him here. Anyway, number 3, after an article is introduced, the select board and ABC will be recognized first. ABC is the advisory budget committee, before any debate from the floor. Number 4, the moderator may limit debate. It's to your advantage to make your presentations kind of short, so you'll hold people's attention. Number 5, comments should be concise and relevant to the article under discussion. Comments about personalities should be avoided. Number 6, all debate and questions will be through the moderator. Number 7, speakers must be recognized by the moderator before speaking, unless someone wishes to bring up a point of order. Speakers must identify themselves and speak into the microphone. Number 8, complicated motions should be submitted in writing. Number 9, amendments must be moved and seconded before discussion, and those making the motion and second must identify themselves. Number 10, only one amendment will be considered at a time. Number 11, speakers are asked to let others speak before they're recognized the second time. Number 12, to request a secret ballot, 5 or more voters in attendance must make the request in writing before a hand vote is called for. Immediately following a hand vote, 7 voters may request a vote by secret ballot, and you can do that orally. Number 13, voters may move to restrict reconsideration of an article after discussion of that article is complete. If a majority of voters support the motion, there can be no further discussion of that article. Number 14, silence your phones, please. Number 15, and this is my favorite, RSA 40:7 says, everyone shall be silent at the desire of the moderator on pain of forfeiting $1 for each offense for use of the town. So if we enforce that, we may offset the tax rate. All right. I'd like to introduce some of the folks up front, probably almost all of the folks up front. I'm Ron St. Jean, I'm the moderator. We have over here Town Clerk Kim Karakas. Say hi, Kim. Hi, Kim. Deputy Clerk Regina Lytle. I said that right? Okay, all right. Town Attorney Jake Whitelaw. Town Administrator Connor McIver. We're going out of order. Just before Connor is Office Administrator Tiffany Connell. Select Board members Andrew Knapp, Tracy Hardikoff, George Bailey, Don Hatch couldn't be here today, and Dan Ayer down there on the end. Advisory Budget Committee members, and I don't know if everybody's here, but we've got Steve Saunders, Peter Royce, Dan Manschreck, John Morris, and George Bailey again. Now, Select Board Chair Andrew Knapp will give us some opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. If you would, we'd like to please ask everyone to make sure their cell phones are on silent, and if you would stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, that would be great. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On behalf of the entire Select Board, I would like to welcome everyone to this morning's deliberative session. This past year, we've made some pretty significant progress in a lot of different areas. And everybody has seen their tax bill. We've moved through the tax process and the budgeting process with a 0% increase in our municipal tax rate. We had the approval of the town hall and have moved forward with the development with the contractor of the new town hall building. We did a renovation, an $80,000 renovation of the police and fire station this past year. We completed the Malago Bridge with 80% of the funds for the Malago Bridge being reimbursed by the state. The investment in our staff was a big part of our year through a compensation study and evaluation that was done where we were able to reevaluate the wages for all of our folks in town and make sure that we are fairly and appropriately compensating the hardworking people that work for our town. And then we also have done a significant amount of technology and IT infrastructure improvements to make sure that the town is well protected and that we're utilizing technology in the most effective ways that we can. So the Select Board is glad to present the warrant with the warrants that you see with board support from the Select Board and the Advisory Budget Committee for most of these articles. Copies of the warrant, zoning amendment, library presentation, budget, and default budget can either be found online or over at the registration table where you came in. The Planning Board worked through the thoughtful process of developing a zoning ordinance, which is Article 2. The library trustees continue their pursuit of the Library Community Center project, which you'll see is Article 3. And we're looking to secure over $1.5 million in state funds for the Green Hill Bridge replacement, which is Article 6. We also support the annual contributions to the capital reserve accounts responsible for future capital expenditures, which are Articles 7 through 14. And then after reviewing the exemptions and articles available to the residents, we felt that adjusting the solar exemption, increasing the elderly income limits, and increasing the service-connected total disability credit were also important for our townsfolk. And these are Articles 15, 16, and 19. The 2020 budget process started this past summer. And for anybody who has either watched the Select Board meetings or been involved in this process knows that it takes a significant amount of time from the board, the department heads, the departments as a whole, the Advisory Budget Committee, and there are a lot of late night meetings that go into the work that everybody puts in to make sure that we put together a fair and equitable budget for the voters and the residents of Barrington. And we're proud to present the voters with a budget increase that is only 2.48%, which was unanimously supported and does not create any additional tax impact for our property taxes this year. The entire budget binder is 400 plus pages, and it's available online at the barrington.nh.gov/2020 budget if anybody is looking for some really exciting reading. So I'd like to thank everybody that was involved in that process. As I said, it was an enormous amount of work, and we met weekly for the better part of 3+ months to make sure that we had a thorough budget prepared for everyone. And the operating budget is Article 5, as you see it when we get into this. So thank you again. We look forward to the questions and the discussions from everyone this morning. And we hope to see everybody on Tuesday, March 10th, for all the articles that will be voted on in this building from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. at night. So thank you very much, and I appreciate everybody's support, help, and service to make Barrington as great as it is.
Thanks, Andy. I've asked Peter Royce of the Advisory Budget Committee just to explain a little bit about what their role is in the preparation of the budget.
Good morning. I've been on the Budget Committee for quite some time. I also serve as the town treasurer. And Ron wanted me to elaborate a bit on what the Budget Committee does in preparation of this meeting. I first have to thank the town administrator, Connor McIver. He did an excellent job of organizing our budget book, if you will. And as you can see, it's rather large. But we also had a schedule of which department was going to present their budget request when. We would meet prior to that presentation of the department head and evaluate, or at least comment on our opinion of what that budget entailed. And then Connor would communicate that to the department head. So it saved us a lot of time at board meetings. I thought it was a pretty efficient process. And again, thanks to our town administrator, I think it was more efficient than ever because we had a very organized type of schedule. If anyone is interested in the Budget Committee, you could leave word at Town Hall or contact me directly if you wish. My email, I believe, is on the town site. And it's proyce@barrington.newhampshire.gov. And again, it's an interesting process. You learn a lot about the budget before this particular meeting. You learn a lot about town governance and a lot about your neighbors actually as to what's going on and what projects are planned. And you know, it's really a very interesting position if you're interested in town governance, and obviously this group of people are. That's why you're here. And I think you would find you learn even more by being a participant in the Budget Committee. So please consider that.
Thank you, Peter. And everybody up front is reminded to get close to your microphones when you're speaking so that the sound reaches the audience. I know most folks out there are close to my age, and we may not hear as well as we used to, so it's good to have it good and loud. Okay, Article 1 is about electing officers for the town. We can't do anything about that today. Sign-up period ended yesterday, so if you missed out, find somebody else that you like and vote for them. Article 2 is a zoning ordinance. We can't take any action on it, but I'll read it, and then we'll have a little bit of presentation about why it's here. Okay, Article 2, zoning solar ordinance. Are you in favor of amendment number 1 to the Barrington zoning ordinance as follows? Add a new section entitled Solar Collection Systems to provide definitions of and regulations to accommodate the solar energy collection systems in appropriate locations while protecting the public's health, safety, and welfare. Further, to amend various other sections of the ordinance, such as setbacks, definitions, and the table of uses, to reflect the addition of this new section. The article is recommended by the Planning Board 5-0. And I believe Jeff Brand of the Planning Board will speak a little bit about this article.
Good morning. Jeff Brand. I'm Vice Chair of the Planning Board. So let me just give you a little bit of history of what prompted this to be developed. Two things happened in the last couple of years. One, the state modified state law, namely RSA 672 and 674, to directly address solar installations. They had done that because there were issues that have come up, new technology, and that towns were implementing regulations basically for aesthetics reasons that were limiting or prohibiting the installation of solar generation capacity or heating. The legislature took that up, and so they changed the law such that they wanted to encourage the installation and use of solar energy generating capacity. At the same time, they wanted to allow the towns to be able to place some common sense regulations. For instance, that if you install a ground-based unit and the sun comes out, that you aren't blinding drivers that are coming down the road. That you aren't, putting a 30-foot high, huge array in the middle of a neighborhood that does have a negative impact on the aesthetics of the neighborhood. But at the same time, not to go beyond that what is reasonable. So that was one thing that happened. The second thing that happened is the town has a master plan as required by state law in order to have a planning board, period. We, the planning board, have been in the process of updating that master plan, and it just so happens that in getting public input, we had somebody that had public meetings to garner the public input. We also had the planning board, we had discussions about things we thought needed to be updated. So in updating the master plan, it also came out that both the community and the planning board wished to encourage the use of solar energy. The zoning regulations currently have nothing about it. So we wanted to take advantage of encouraging, by placing in the reg, it more or less encourages people to go ahead and consider the use of solar energy. At the same time, take advantage of reasonable limitations that the state allowed in the new law in order to, like I said, for safety reasons, and make sure if you're going to hook an installation into a house, you get an electrical inspection so that you don't burn the house down after you have hooked up the unit. Some reasonable things on using vegetation in order such that aesthetically, it doesn't bother the neighbors. We also looked at, what were the goals based on the public input and based on the planning board that are consistent with the master plan with respect to commercial generation. Basically, what we said in these new regulations is that, okay, but we did not want to turn Barrington, New Hampshire into the electrical generation station for the state of New Hampshire. But at the same time, if people want to go ahead and put solar panels on the roof of their house, their barn, if a business wants to do it, that's just fine, and so we want to encourage that. So that's the basis upon which the planning board was operating when it came up with the regulations.
Thank you, Jeff. Any comments from the select board? Oh, anything? Anybody in the audience have anything to say? Matt Towns.
Thank you for taking my question. My name is Matt Town. I live out on Ayers Lake. I applaud this zoning ordinance as an owner of an IRA. Excuse me. It generates an enormous amount of power for our house, so I'm really glad to see this codified in a way that will help move solar power forward. My one question is, and I'm sure there's a rationale, I just can't see it, is 21.7. It's the very last statement, just on abandonment of solar panels have to be taken down if they haven't been used for 6 months. So if they could address that piece, I'd be interested in that response. But yeah, I totally support this zoning change.
Jeff?
I appreciate your question. What we wanted to, we have had issues, all towns have had issues, in which people put up buildings that have been abandoned.
Close to the mic, Jim.
Big signs that have been abandoned. And we also have a concern, you've got this equipment setting out there, and if it gets abandoned there, that it's not just an aesthetics problem, but it's an environmental problem if you simply leave it there and let it decay. So, I think, our thoughts, you notice that we put in a square footage figure there. We weren't talking about something on somebody's roof here, but our concern was somebody goes out and puts up an acre's worth of solar panels, abandons the property, leaves it there, and potentially it becomes a safety and environmental hazard for the community that we're then going to have to deal with. We just wanted to ensure that people are responsible, and if they're going to abandon the property of the units, that they can become dysfunctional. Maybe they don't want to repair the units, that they just don't leave them to present a danger to the public.
Thank you.
Any other comments on Article 2? Okay, we'll move on to Article 3. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $4,239,877 gross budget for the construction of a library and community center, including but not limited to building construction, site work, architectural fees, engineering, permitting, inspection, furniture, commissioning, and other expenses to occupy the building, and to authorize the issuance of not more than $3,998,877 of bonds or notes in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Finance Act, RSA 33, and to authorize the Select Board to issue and negotiate such bonds or notes and to determine the rate of interest thereon. The remaining $241,000 required for the project will come from the Barrington Library Foundation. 3/5 majority required. Note, this appropriation is in addition to Warrant Article 5, the operating budget article. This article is recommended by the Select Board 3-0 and by the Advisory Budget Committee 3-2. This article will have no impact on 2020 property taxes, but there is a commitment to make payments in future years which will increase property taxes in those years approximately 31 cents per thousand of assessed value, or $93 per year on a $300,000 property. I recognize Lindsay Maziarz, President of the Library Trustees, to give you a little presentation about this article.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Good? Okay. My name is Lindsay Maziarz, and I'm the chair of the Library Trustees here in Barrington. I also serve on the board of the Barrington Library Foundation. I'm here today to present on the new public library and community center being proposed on the March 2020 ballot. Bear with me. Let's see if this works. Not so far. There we go. Libraries change lives. Our library changed my life, that of a new mother suddenly at home in a rural town, knowing no one, not even knowing where to begin to meet people like myself. It was story time with Miss Wendy that I met my closest friends and their children. These people are now my family. They're the ones I call in the middle of the night in an emergency. They're the ones that love my children like their own. My story is a common one here in our town. Our library also changed the life of a gentleman who was retired from the military. He didn't have any local friends or family to interact with, so he found himself at the library often. He started coming in at the same time every week when a group of residents that had formed their own mahjong club invited him to join in. They laughed and talked while teaching him the game. Now every week he is there with his friends that he may not have otherwise connected with. These are just two small examples, while I know countless other stories that I could share. Libraries change lives. They build community, all while fostering lifelong learning. Maybe it should be, there we go. So, as you all know, our library is fantastic. The staff does so much for our residents in our town that some people have asked why we even need a new building. So let's talk about our current space. Right now, our public library does not meet ADA compliancy. Our stacks are 7 feet high and go all the way to the floor, making it impossible for many patrons to reach the books that they desire. Our rows end and are much too narrow to fit wheelchairs and strollers. The hall to the restroom does not allow for wheelchairs to pass by. Where we are now, our collections cannot grow without removing other books and media. There isn't just zero space for growth, there is zero space now. Our current space has one private room that serves many functions. This room fits 30 people, which we know from statistics is not large enough. We don't have any quiet study rooms, and with the rec department below, even if you get to the library and can get a spot at the back table, you'll hear the noise from the gym. Currently, our programming room is also the children's room, so if a meeting has to take place, the door is closed and children cannot come in and access their space or their books. We can do better. The staff currently sit in a 12 by 12 space where there are 4 seats and workstations for 6 employees. The director's office is also the server room where all the computer systems are located, and the kitchen slash staff room does not get used for sitting and eating as there is no space. This room is also used as storage. Many people have told us that there is nowhere in our town to hold meetings, may they be large or small. Many need a space to take an online test, have an interview, work on a school project on the weekend, or have a warm place away from home to work. Currently, our space does not allow for this. The Barrington ECLC, where our children learn to love to read, does not have a library in their building. Our preschool and kindergarten students have a schedule with our public library where they bring classrooms over every day of the week to have literacy time and to check out books to supplement their work. We also have a great homeschool community in our town, and they very much utilize our library to supplement their educational needs. Lastly, when the library moves into the new space, the current space will be freed up for other departments to use. We've heard time and time again from residents in our town that we would benefit from a community center. Since we live in a rural area, it's hard to gather, meet new people, and foster relationships. The new library and community center will be just that, a place for residents of all ages to come together. The seniors and parents in our community have expressed a great need for this, not to mention the teenagers, who many speak to wanting to have a place to be after school. This would be a safe option for them all. There are lots of community organizations in town that struggle to find space to hold a meeting. Often you'll hear of a club meeting down at Milo's or in someone's home. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to host a Lions Club meeting, a Garden Club meeting, or any other club's meeting in this new space? Not to mention, this space offers after-hour access. I know many of you have seen our presentations throughout the year, so I don't want to dwell on the past, but I do want you all to understand how we've gotten to where we are now. So a quick background. We moved into our 3,700 square foot space on Ramsdale Lane, located in that location in 2000, after the Town Hall and Police Department relocated. We hired a library consultant in 2005. We hired the SMP architecture firm in 2008. The Barrington Library Foundation nonprofit started in spring of 2015. We held community meetings in residential homes and to town organizations. Oh, what's happening there? Bear with us, I can keep talking. A building committee was formed. The construction management firm was hired in fall of 2018. I think I got it now over here, guys. Information sessions with the architect occurred last fall. We fundraised. We brought the warrant to ballot in 2019, where the voter turnout was 31%, which apparently was a record from previous local elections. We had the support of 54% of our residents, but not the supermajority or 60%, which is what a bond requires. So where are we now? March 2019 was the first time we presented the bond to the town, even though years had been spent working on this. We wanted to come prepared and with a plan for you all. So after the vote, we held a post-mortem and re-energized our volunteers. We got behind our new motto, 2020 Vision, and incorporated that into our marketing campaign. We had monthly meetings of trustees and foundation members. Donations were received. Grants were applied for. We went to events around the community to answer questions from residents. The building committee worked with the SMP Architecture in Bowen to value engineer the project further. We participated in select board meetings. We held community information sessions this past fall, and our budget was visited repeatedly to come forward with an accurate and concise plan with real numbers. It's important to share that this has been a team effort that has begun well over 10 years ago. The library trustees, which consists of 8 volunteers, have worked closely with the Library Foundation, which is a nonprofit that was formed to be the fundraising arm of the project. The director and staff of the library play an important role identifying needs. Community members invited us into their homes, donated financially and with in-kind services. Community businesses have sponsored rooms in the new space, made financial donations, and hosted events throughout the years to help us fundraise money. S&P Architecture, who has a deep experience in library construction, was hired in '08. Lastly, our building committee, which is made up of library trustees, the library director, foundation members, and community members who are rich in experience in construction of town buildings, hired Bowen Corporation out of Meredith to serve as our construction management firm. The takeaway here, excuse me, is that most of the people are Barrington residents, and we're giving up so much of our precious time to work on this project. When the Library Foundation was formed, we had a goal to raise $500,000 to put towards this project. I'm so excited to announce to you all that we have reached our goal with so many of your help. Our latest updated fundraising total is $501,628. This is a historical moment in Barrington, one that every one of you should be proud of. So let's talk about where this new building will be in town. Currently, we are here. This is tricky to see, and I have a fancy laser pointer, but I worry I will be pointing at all of your faces. So, again, like it was said earlier, you can find all this information on the website, and there is some handouts over there. But I think in the sea of red that most of you know this pretty well. Currently, we're sharing our building with the rec department. Our new space would be on the other side of the community playground, still within walking distance to the ECLC, which was of utmost importance to us. This is town-owned land and is convenient for those already used to going to Ramsdale Lane. The playground right next door is a great benefit for parents. This very dark slide shows us a closer aerial view of the location. There was careful consideration of where to locate the new building as to not to disturb the recreation fields. This is the view from Route 9. It's important to note that we have reduced the size of the new building from the original recommendation. Patience Jackson was the original library consultant in '05 that we hired. She did a comprehensive study of our town's future needs. Her entire and thorough report is still on our website. Based on population projections, she recommended a 17,000 square foot building to accommodate for the growth of our town. Her recommendations were spot on back then. Subsequently, technological advances have changed the playing field a bit, allowing us to propose a smaller building. Our plans are to build a 13,120 square foot building. Here is the main entrance from the lower parking lot. You'll see solar panels on the roof. We are currently working on a grant to cover the cost of these solar panels and have received an in-kind donation for the installation of them. We know how important energy efficiency is to the residents of our town. Here we see the parking lot. In our current building, we have 12 spaces. In our new building, there will be 50. This is the conceptual floor plan. The final layout and details will be determined by the building committee following approval. But just to point out, there are a few different meeting rooms. The community room can hold up to 100 people with the infrastructure in place to install a divider. The space is also separate from the main library for after-hour events. There's what we're calling the Barrington room, which is a boardroom for 12 people. Study rooms for smaller meetings, interviews, and exam administration. There's a craft and maker room for children's story times and ECLC library visits. There are two entrances, which are, again, hard to see on here, but the main entrance, which is for all of us to enter in, and then there is a second entrance in the children's corner that is a locked door. The exit-only style door is for the ECLC to use, which increases their safety. They won't have to walk through the parking lot any longer. There will be a walking path from the school to the door. In regards to the collection of materials, you'll see, kind of, that every age has their own space. The adults are in front of the building with purple with a nice big window near the coffee station. Young adult space flows back to the juvenile and into the children's corner. Each space has been designed to meet the needs of that age group. For example, we purposely placed the children in the back corner to enhance their safety as well as to reduce noise, which is something that residents spoke to. Lastly, I want to point out that the after-hours space. When the library closes at night, there is a gate that will close and lock the library off, leaving the coffee station, lobby, bathrooms, and programming room open to reserve and use. This slide hones in on the space and points out key pieces. You'll see right away the entry lends itself to the community center feel. It leads right into an active area. As you all know, when you walk into our current library, people gather right inside the doorway. They see friends and neighbors and chat and catch up. This area has been modeled for these things to continue. This area is expected to be loud, with plenty of seats and a coffee machine and a beautiful patio that was sponsored in donations, so residents can sit outside together. Then you'll see passive zones, which are quiet spaces. Inside each of the pictures, there are dots, and that shows you where the stacks are. And all along the edges of the inside of the building are nice windows letting in sunshine with comfortable seating for people to work or read quietly. Lastly, you see the hub of the building. This is the circulation desk that was built with a curve so that the staff could see all parts of the library. It's important because our goal is to maintain the level of staffing we currently have. If we had a 2-floor building, for example, we would certainly need to hire more staff to have people on the second floor. Here's an inside perspective. We want the space to flow and be open, have lots of light and be comfortable. It is placed in such a way that will maximize our sun exposure, and as I said earlier, the potential for solar is there. It's important that this new building lasts and will sustain our ever-growing population. This building is carefully planned to meet the needs of our community for up to 40 to 50 years. So let's talk about the budget. The total cost of the project is $4,239,877. The fundraising cash on hand currently is $241,000. The bond amount, which is what the taxpayers will be responsible for, is $3,998,877. I think it's important to just quickly mention that last year's bond article was $3,992,641. For those of you that have been keeping up with this, the construction rates have gone anywhere from 3 to 21% increase. The trustees and the building committee have worked extremely hard to continue to decrease the cost of this building for all of you by making that bond nearly the same as last year, even though we know that numbers have gone up otherwise. We are recommending a 20-year bond payment schedule. This is extremely difficult for you all to see, but in your packet, you'll see that this explains the cost per square foot of New Hampshire public libraries. It's important that we're comparing libraries to libraries when we talk cost per square foot. And on here, you'll see us compared to other local libraries. And you'll see that our cost per square foot is on the lower end compared to other libraries in the state that have been built recently. The tax impact. There's a tax impact calculator that can be found on our website where you simply plug in the assessed property value of your home and your annual taxes going to the library bond repayment will display. This is a little outdated as I did it a couple days ago and we have the information now that it will be, I think he said 31 cents per thousand. And so instead of being, if we go down to the $300 home, instead of being $102 a year, I think Ron said 93. And if folks have questions about this, our town administrator, Connor, is excellent at explaining this, and I'm sure he is happy to help us if we need him to work through that with us. So the timeline. Groundbreaking on the new building will begin in late September, early October of this year. Construction will take about 10 months, with a late summer opening in 2021. We have worked diligently to create a space for our community and build a building that will last for 50 years. This building will allow us to gather as a community in the traditional sense, but open us up to new and exciting programming ideas as well. Remember that the library offers many resources to our community members other than programming and books. We supply audiobooks, DVDs, Blu-rays, museum passes, free Wi-Fi, use of technology, and those are just tangible things. If this is exciting you and you would like to get involved, please attend one of our meetings. We meet monthly, sometimes more than what is stated there. Like us on Facebook, like us on Twitter. And as you all know, things are constantly changing. So if you need up-to-date information, this is the slide that gives you the information on where to get that. If you have questions, feel free to send them in. I think lastly, before I end, I want to let you all know that today is also National Bring Your Child to the Library Day. How perfect. And the staff has done an excellent job at creating some crafts and events for them all today. Secondly, a local artist that many of you know, Lauren Despins, whose beautiful pottery will be on sale at the library today, as well as a portion of her proceeds will go to the new space. So thank you all for your time and your support, and we'll see you in March.
Lindsay. Do we have any comments from the select board? Tracy?
So when we speak from the position of a select person, understand that we don't also give away our own personal perspective on things. I tend to be someone who's pretty centrist and like to keep our budgets intact and be very mindful of all socioeconomic levels and who we're affecting. However, I've done a lot of research from a policy perspective on the numbers of our growing population here in Barrington. It is not likely to slow over time. We're going to continue to be a community that attracts new residents to our community, both because it's a beautiful natural resource here in Barrington. We're a water-rich community here in Barrington. We have an incredible resident base that's very interconnected and talks often about the sense of community here in our small, sleepy bedroom town. So we're going to continue to grow, folks, and there's nothing that we personally, as a select board, could do to stop that. What we can do is create an infrastructure in our buildings and plan for our future. The library doesn't just impact reading. It has a social impact, it has an educational impact, it has a generational impact. It levels socioeconomic status in a way that few other buildings and programming can. It increases people's mental health, which in turn tends to increase their physical health. These things end up in the long run saving money, not costing money. Imagine that children before the age of 18 months, the words that they hear at that time, the number of words spoken before 18 months has been proven to have a direct impact on whether a child will attend post-secondary education someday. I like to live with smart people. I hope that we've done enough, and this is again my own personal reflection, to look at our elderly exemptions and to be certain that we're doing our best for all residents of the town in order to keep any type of tax increase at bay. We did that, I think, intentionally, at least that was my intention, so that people who would be affected by a tax increase may not be affected by it when the library is approved. I'm hoping that as we continue to grow as a town, that you'll continue to understand that infrastructure planning matters. The federal board that sets our rates kept financing of bonds stagnant this round. We have very few opportunities where we'd be able to enter into a building like this with a bond rate as low as it is. And so while I respect everyone's socioeconomic status and the impact taxes have on everyone, I hope that as a community we will support this bill.
Any other select board comments? EBC? Some folks like to say anything? No? Okay. Anybody out here? Do you have comments or questions about the library proposal? Gee, maybe because you're all wearing red, that could be why there's no question. Ah, good, that time.
Good morning. Again, my name is Matt Town. So I speak to you today as both in my role as a citizen, but also in my role as a legislative representative for this town. I would encourage people, at least my view of this project is more of a legacy issue. When this library finally gets built, it will affect people well beyond people who are sitting in this room or even live in Barrington at this point in time. It's really a generational issue. And so it's really incumbent upon us to be thinking about what comes after us. And so in that sense, it's a legacy issue. What we leave behind really matters. And we don't always have a chance to go back and do it again. So this is a great opportunity to seize the land that we own, the building project that's been going on for 10 years, and really capitalize on all these pieces coming together as one. So I'd encourage you to think about our responsibility as citizens to the next generation and several other generations coming after us.
Dan Matrek, 353 Street Pond Road. I chose to come up here rather than as my position on the budget committee to support this library. Most everyone said everything. I have a whole speech all written here. Most everyone said it, so I won't spend too much time on this. But I do think that it's interesting. New Hampshire has a great history of libraries. We have the first public library in the United States was in Peterborough in 1833. Our legislature was the first to authorize public libraries in 1849. And our state and our town, our community, I think, is based, has a lot of basis on public libraries. As everyone, or several people have pointed out, libraries are a great democratic institution. They mix people of all ethnic groups, of all incomes, of all educations, of all ages, and I think our library certainly meets this. But the current library, which is a wonderful place, if you haven't been there, please do, is too small. And if we're going to have a library that will meet our needs for the next several decades, I think that it's time to move on to this particular library. It's never going to be cheaper, and it's, I think, a very worthwhile project. I think the library board, trustees, foundation have worked very hard to make this as cost-effective as possible. I think this is the library that our community needs, and will bring us forward and be of use to this community for the next several decades. Thank you.
Jack Gale, 798 Berry River Road. A few facts, some you just heard, but reiterate some. The world's first great library was created by the Greek Ptolemaic kings in Egypt, in Alexandria, hundreds of years before the birth of Christ. The first library in America was started by a gentleman you know as Ben Franklin in 1731. And to repeat again, the first public library supported by taxes was started up in nearby Peterborough, New Hampshire. The Wall Street Journal reflected on the most important events in the past millennium in 1999 as we were coming up on Y2K. And they named Gutenberg's movable type printing press and the quantum leap for mankind to share information as having the most lasting impact of anything that happened in the past 1,000 years. And yes, I spent too much time in the history section of the Barrington Library. Now you might think with all this history and all the internet that's available to us that the library must now be obsolete. But you would be wrong, and I invite you to look it up. The only thing obsolete about today's public library is yesterday's definition of public library. The 5 laws of library science, which were codified back in 1931, listed at number 5, that the library is a growing organism. Our Barrington Library is that organism. It is not only a repository of books, it has grown to be a place of discovery for children, a hall of study for students, an IT guru for the local citizens, a home for clubs to share common passions, a studio to inspire creativity in everything from Legos to watercolor, and a host of civic activities that are the foundation of our nation. They have stacked the books, the people, in a very crowded schedule into a small building, and they've become a community center. They have responded to the needs of their community and evolved to be so much more than what the traditional term library brings to mind. I fully support this article and can't wait to see what the next evolution of this organism we call library brings to our community. Thank you.
My name is Karen Town. I live on Stillwater Way in Barrington. When I moved to Barrington 8 years ago, I was nearing retirement, and I looked for opportunities to volunteer. I've always loved libraries. My mother was a town librarian for years, and I was asked to join this group who, for the past 10 years, have worked many hours in researching and trying to build the best library possible. I'd like to read a quote by Angela Clark that I found. A library is not just a reference service, it's a place for the vulnerable. From the elderly gentleman whose only remaining human interaction is with the library staff, to the isolated young mother who relishes the support and friendship that grows from a baby rhyme time session to a slow-moving 30-something woman collecting her CDs. Libraries are a haven in a world where community services are being ground down to nothing. In a world where community services are being ground down to nothing, libraries are vital. Their worth cannot be measured in books alone. I ask you all to support this endeavor. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Roger Gingrich. I live at 32 Peabody Way. I'd like to say some things in support of the library and start by an appreciation to those individuals, a large number of those individuals from our own community that over the past 15 years have focused substantial energy on the issue of this library for our town. We live in a culture where individualism is hyped and often extolled in numerous ways. This team has been working on the library project, and I have been privileged to work with this team for over 2 years. They have come together from vastly different backgrounds and life journeys, as different in most ways as we are from each other in this room at this moment, but with one shared common vision, purpose, and belief, that being that a very important element of living life to its fullest in this 21st century town that aspires to be a high-quality community for its citizens means having an excellent town library and community center that is capable of serving us all well into the latter part of this century. Recall that a near 54% majority of Barrington voters 11 months ago agreed with that vision. Numerous surveys and studies have shown over and over that a high-quality town library is indispensable, even absolutely necessary for a group of people who choose to live in proximity to each other, to be or become a vibrant, highly functional, caring, and resilient community. And yes, in that setting, individualism does get squeezed, but not unfairly so, in my opinion, because everyone in the community, even those who choose not to use the library, everyone benefits directly or indirectly from the many values the library and the community center afford. And speaking of affording, your own town tax rate now stands at $22.67 per $1,000. That's down 8.5% from last year's $24.78, and in no small part due to the work that has been put forth by your town governments. This is the lowest in the last 5 years. Moreover, compared to 230 other New Hampshire towns, we are in the lower half of that range, at about the 43rd percentile. So it would seem reasonable, most reasonable, to say we are poised in an advantageous, unique position with an amazing alignment of the stars to grab this opportunity now to build a new library and community center for our children, our grandchildren, our friends and neighbors, and as well ourselves. We are all part of this community, and as such, we assume some part of an obligation to make it better for all members now and in the future. Thank you very much.
You can raise that mic, Carl, if you want.
Oops, I'm sorry. So you better?
Put the whole thing up.
Oh, okay. I'm not used to speaking with mics. As an ex-prof, I used to yell just as was. The only thing you absolutely have to know is the location of the library. That's a quote from Albert Einstein, which hangs on a very large banner at the UNH library as you enter. My name is Carl Arndt. As you see, I used to teach at UNH periodically. Did real estate for a while. Taught the last 13 years of my life as one-year contracts in what used to be East Germany, in Neubrandenburg, which is between Berlin and the Baltic. That's all neither here nor there, but it's an interesting part of my life. I returned in 2003 to a place that I built on Mendon's Pond on McDaniel Short Drive. At the time, I had no connection. I was just coming back into town after having been away for 13 13 years. And my first act was to go get a library card. Fortunately, my neighbor across the way in McDaniel Shore Drive was a librarian. She recognized me. She vouched for me and got me a card before I even had an electric bill or anything could prove that I was a resident. So, as you can see, I'm marginally illegal, okay? I had all of these friends in East Germany, all over Europe, all these people that I wanted to get in contact with, and internet and such was too damn expensive for me. So I walked over to the library. That's a 4-mile one-way walk. And I got to be known in the area as the walker. Dogs would bark, mothers would gather their children into the porch under their skirts. He's the walker. Because nobody walks in America, come on. You know? So anyway, the walker, I used the internet. I was over there maybe 2-3 times a week. I'd look to my left and there's this guy in torn shorts and a rather well-used t-shirt. And what's he doing? He's researching job opportunities. And he's applying online to maybe get a job. He's unemployed. And the librarians are helping him. How do I write a resume? How do I submit this crap? They're helping him. And look on the other side, there's this, let me say, blue-haired lady, and she's sitting there, and she's looking for her ancestors. I walk into the library, I trip over all these rugrats all over the place. You've heard the name Miss Wendy. These kids are learning to read, actually read words, not just diddle around on little computer thingies in their hands. I'm sorry, this is all very personal. It's not anything to do with the figures that you've heard so capably presented by my predecessors. Just let me pick up maybe 2 more anecdotal things. I was thinking back to the very first book that I can recall reading in my childhood. And the title is The Lonely Dwarf. Don't ask me the author, can't think of it. And I mentioned to Amy one day that was the first book that I'd ever read, and I'd love to see it again. She gets on Interlibrary for me and locates in all of American libraries, there are 2 copies of this book. She gets it from me out of state, I think from Colorado or something like that, gets it for me on Interlibrary. I smuggle it off to the copy offer in Durham. The library would never ever copy anything like that for me. It's protected, okay? So I smuggled it off into this copy office in Durham and had the whole damn thing copied for myself. And now I've got the first book I ever read. Talk about happy? My God. Okay, I've got a bunch of things here. I'm going to jump. I hear Microsoft is discontinuing support of operating systems, et cetera, going to get expensive. What do? You go to the library. My printer, I print very rarely. My cartridges always dry up on me. I've got opera tickets that I'm going to print out shortly at the library that are for my friend and myself in Berlin in June. The library. I receive a tiny, tiny pension for my 13 years of teaching in Germany. To do that, I've got to prove to the German government that I'm still alive and kicking. I've got to get something notarized. Where do I do that? I go to the library. Think of what I'm saving in terms of attorney fees and stuff like that, okay? Think of what I'm saving not having to buy into new Microsoft. One final, and I'm going to sit down and shut up. Before my knees gave out and my walking ceased, at one point I had a long day's thing. I had to pick up my mail, post office box down at the post office, and I'm riding a bike. It's midsummer, it's hotter than the hinges of hell. I'm pushing the bike up the sharp incline from the post office up to the library, and I'm nearing heat prostration, okay? And car comes down the hill, and it's Dave from the library coming off his shift, and he stops, and he rolls down the window. He says, "Carl, you all right? Want some water?" And he's extending his water bottle to me, and I said, no, I'm almost there. I get up to the library, I walk in the front door, and the people at the desk say, "Hi, Carl, Dave just called in, are you all right? Make sure you go over the water fountain and get hydrated." Ladies and gentlemen, the library cares about you. It is our turn to care about the library. Thank you very, very much. If I leave precipitously, It's because I just got a note last night in my email that my last interlibrary loan book has just come in. Thank you very much.
I'm going to be really short and sweet here. Leslie Cragen, 38 Corbett Road. I just wanted to point out that I'm on the school board budget committee, and we are in the very tail end of our middle school bond, which was substantially more money than the library bond we'll be looking for. It's about $800,000 a year in the budget, and that is going to be ending very soon. So I just want to point out that we have a reduction coming up, and this is going to fill that gap very marginally. So please support the library.
Ken Grossman, Scruton Pond Road. It's wonderful to be at a love fest, but the reality is that on March 10th, somebody's going to show up and vote against this. I can't believe it. But in the interests of some transparency and some reality, when I heard the votes that Ron gave us, the vote of the select board was 3-0, and I'm puzzled. There are 5 members of the select board, and is that accurate? Was it 3-0?
That's correct. There was one member who was not present on voting day and another member who just voted as present.
I see.
A positive vote of 3-0.
Yeah, so that's noted. And then the advisory budget committee voted 3-2, so there were 2 members of the budget advisory committee who voted no on this. And so my question is, if any of those people who either only voted their presence or who voted no or present, I'd like to know what it would take to get your support, because we need lots of support. Having a majority last year didn't do it. We need 60%. What would it take to get the support of the member who didn't vote or the members of the advisory budget committee who voted no? Let's put that in front of us. I think that's important.
Carolina Bodner from Young Road, Lois Lane, and it's been 10 years on Lois Lane. Since I retired, I've been going to the library maybe 3 to 4 or 5 times a week. It's become a very important part of my life. When I arrive at the library, if I'm there early in the morning, there are people waiting to get in who run to the computers or different parts of the library. For me, 10 years ago, I knew very little about computers, and the library has been incredibly helpful in teaching me all the computer skills and helping me to just learn a whole lot about things that have improved my life. The book groups have been incredible. I've been able to meet people in Barrington that I never would have met before, and we crowd into a tiny space and have incredible conversation. About 5 years ago, I think it was, I was able to take part in an incredible, wonderful community initiative where we got together and talked about our visions for Barrington. And I remember at that time people talking a lot about wanting community space, especially space for seniors and places to do things, and they wanted more activities. So I started to sign up to present activities in the crafts room. I remember one of the times that I went in to do my workshop, there was a gentleman sitting on the floor in the room reading to his 2 or 3-year-old daughter. And sadly, we had to ask them to leave, and then we had to roll up the rug to do the workshop that I was going to do. It required water, so we had to bring in buckets of water because there's no water in that crafts room. So those are just kind of a couple of different things. Recently, I went to another local library in the area to meet somebody for an important meeting, and they had a tiny little room for about 4 people, a private space where you can meet with your tax person or with a family member or any other need that you might have. These are just a few other kinds of things that libraries do nowadays. So again, I'm just encouraging you to understand the importance nowadays of the library. Oh, one thing that I meant to mention, there are many people who cannot afford to have internet at home that use the library's internet services. And that includes children, students who are supposed to be doing homework on computers but don't have access at home. So there are very, very many important broad uses for the library, and I would like to thank all the people who've worked for, it must be about 15 years now, to try to help us get this library. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andy Blaze, and I've been in Barrington lived here for almost 30 years. I don't generally speak, but I thought I would at this particular stage. My history, a little bit years ago, I've been retired now for at least 10, maybe 12 years. I had a small business, and it was called Assessment Consultants. Basically, I dealt with the relationship with towns in particular, the relationship that there exists between the costs of running the town and the taxes, the value of property. So based on that, I found that in the end, you can kind of reduce it down to two things. I bet you all of us here, one thing we want is to pay less tax. I bet you I can, I say, how many people here want less taxes? They'd all have their hands up. and if I said, well, okay, how? And the other thing I want is I want the value of my property to go up. So how am I going to work that? Well, smartly, I hope. But the point is that if, the first thing I do, as an example, is I drive down, not first thing, but I happen to drive down the road and I see a new subdivision in town. And I see a house and property being built that's worth twice what I have. I like that. Because what that does is shift that taxation issue to that particular individual. The guy that owns a $600,000 house is going to pay twice as much in taxation than I will because my property is only worth $300,000. So how am I going to reduce the cost? Yes, that's the one item. I could say, hey, don't vote anything in. Let's reduce it. Let's not pave that road down the road. Let's not hire good teachers. But if we do that, what's that going to do to the value of the property? Because we're all, as a community, competing with that other house. We want people to build bigger, better homes, commercial properties, and so on. Because that's what's going to affect me in my taxation. So one way to do that is to, again, you have to do it smartly. But I look at this, if I understand it correctly, my house, in fact, is worth around $300,000 assessment. I will be paying roughly another $93 per year, not this year, but the following year. And who knows how much that bond is going on, I'm not sure. But regardless, I'm looking at that, I said, oh, in 10 years' time, my contribution to the library, as an example, will be less than $1,000 or somewhere near that. Is how much effect will that new library have on the value of my property? If my property, the next guy that comes in here and says, boy, I want to live in Barrington. They have a nice library, they have the best schools, best teachers, maybe not the best, but pretty darn good. Well, that's the guy that all the other towns are competing for, because he wants to live and enjoy the value of living here. And to do that, we as a town have to compete with other towns to try to bring these people in. So at least on my vote, it makes no sense to me not to put the library in. Put it in. That raises the value of the town. Because I know it's going to have a bigger effect on the value of my property than the lousy $1,000 it's going to cost me in 10 minutes' time. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm William Yu, 24 Hunter Lane. I just wanted to speak as somebody who has 2 young children, goes to the library weekly for, not only story time, but to check out books, and it's just too small. I mean, you really can't move or get a book off the shelf. The other day I was looking at the sci-fi section and trying to get a book off the shelf, and I kind of had to maneuver around a guy that was sitting at a chair, and and there was less than like a foot of space between him and the actual stack, so there's no way I was going to get that book without bothering him. And we just need a bigger space. I'll just speak to the last speaker. We moved to Barrington because of excellent school system, the great rec program, the rural character of the town, among other things. And I think that you definitely have to consider what people are looking for. If you want young families to come and move to this town, you have to have services in place that are going to support them. I think the library, it's absolutely the right time. It's exactly what this town needs. And the cost is so negligible. If you look at a town where I moved from, Farmington, that town has terrible financial problems and other problems, but yet they have a library that's almost twice as large as what we have in Barrington. Which is kind of disappointing when you think about it. I just hope that people will support it and we'll have the supermajority this year. Thank you.
Okay, last call on Article 3. Anybody have anything they want to say? Nope, nobody else? All right. Article 3 will appear on the ballot as written. Moderator? Charter?
Charter Week, Scruton Pond Road. I move that this be restricted from further consideration at this meeting.
Okay, anybody second that?
Second.
You need a name.
Lisa Titus. Lisa White.
Okay, all in favor of restricting reconsideration on this article, raise your cards. Anybody opposed? Raise your cards. Okay, Article 3 is restricted. Article 4, Stormwater Asset Management Grant. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $30,000 gross budget to defray the cost of planning for public facilities for development and implementation of an asset management plan for the town's stormwater collection and conveyance systems, and to authorize the select board to apply for a clean water revolving fund loan in that amount. The loan will be forgiven in its entirety. Further, to authorize the select board to take all other actions necessary to carry out and complete this project. 3/5 majority required. Note this appropriation is in addition to warrant Article 5, the operating budget article. This article is recommended by the select board 3-0 and the advisory budget committee 5-0. This article will have no impact on the 2020 property taxes. And select person Matt will speak about this one.
This is a way for us to complete a GIS inventory of our stormwater management infrastructure, our asset management from the standpoint that if we need to request federal funding, we have it available, and process it through the use of grant money so that there is no tax impact to any of the residents in the town for it, as well as help us with future MS4 compliance. That's all I have to say about it.
Okay, anybody else on the select board? The ABC? Anybody out there? Have anything they want to say about Article 4? Last chance. Okay, Article 4 will appear on the warrant on the ballot as Article 5, the operating budget. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amounts set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by the vote of the first session, that's us, for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $7,300,847. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $7,167,887, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the town or by law. Or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, Roman numerals 10 and 16, to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. Majority vote required. This article is recommended by the Select Board 3-0 and the ABC 5-0. This article will have no impact on 2020 property taxes because of revenue increases. And Connor will speak about this article.
Yes, very briefly. So as the chair indicated, it was a long budget process this year, very thoughtful. I certainly appreciate the help of all of the department heads, the select board, and the advisory budget committee. We started in September, and we have confidence that we're presenting voters with a very thoughtful budget to consider. So anybody here, the green copy is primarily what we're talking about. We also have copies of the presentation for the information that's on the slide. Additionally, anybody connected or watching from home, the entire budget binder, all 400 pages, tabbed out in sections, is available online. So anybody looking for more information that might not want to ask a question today, but follow up on additional details, probably anything you're looking for is in there, and if not, you can certainly reach out and we can get your questions answered. So the highlights, $7.3 million budget, 2.48% increase. Not estimated to have any tax impact because of revenue increases. The default budget, which is the yellow copy that's over on the table at the registration area, $7.167 million. That's the budget that was approved for 2019, plus contractual expenses, minus any one-time expenditures. Like I said, more information is available online. So big picture, property tax is the primary funding source for government services. On the municipal level, we bring a fair amount of money in through vehicle registration also. A much smaller portion, fees for service, your trash bags, building inspector fees, things like that. Some state and federal aid, and other municipal funding. So as we've highlighted, and I think this is a really important for folks in the room, a really important slide for folks in the room to pay attention to. So this is the municipal tax rate dating back to 2013. And the story that this tells is that the select board and town government has worked very hard over the last nearly 10 years to keep the municipal tax rate stable. And so you'll see fluctuations. The fluctuations in the rate is based on value changes primarily. So in 2017, the municipal tax rate dropped a fair amount. And that's because assessments were raised 8.4%. The gentleman earlier, Mr. Blaze, indicated perfectly how the value in town affects your tax rate. And so that happened again this year. In 2019, a revaluation was performed and indicated that across the board on average, values in Barrington rose 12.25%. So certainly your taxes went up. Taxes on average went up about 5% in 2019, but the tax rate dropped $2.11, and that's because of that value increase. And so the municipal tax rate in 2019 is $3.69 as a result. And again, from 2013 to 2019, the impact is about 0% throughout that because of value changes. So this is more specifically the 2019 tax rate, so $22.67. The education portion is $16.56. That had a net impact of an increase of 4.87% from 2018. Municipal portion is $3.69, which was a 0% increase, and the county portion is $2.42, which is 2.89% increase. And you can see the pie chart there. Information will also be in the town report, which will be available ahead of the March election. Very generally, this budget has funding to implement the compensation study the chair referenced earlier, setting the wages and benefits in Barrington at a competitive place for municipalities across the state. On the benefit portion of wages, the health insurance increase was only 1%, which is terrific for the town and impact to the budget. There's expansion for fire department staffing in this proposed budget. Another larger increase was a result of having 4 elections in 2020 versus 1 in 2019. That will go back down in future years, and continued IT infrastructure improvements and maintenance. There are some, as the chair indicated, we're in the process of finalizing the design for the new town hall. We still anticipate construction this year, construction and completion this year. So that $1.9 million budget for design and construction will cover all associated costs. It's important to highlight these cost items as items which, certainly could argue it's connected to the town hall. These are expenditures we need to make, certainly because we're moving. Some furniture that we have now that is either built into the space or we won't be taking with us because we don't own it in the town clerk office and the building department. Some moving expenses in furniture. Again, some of the furniture we use in the town hall right now is owned by the landlords. And the larger expense, we've been in the building we are in now for over 8 years, and the lease requirements indicate certain things for returning the facility back to the landlords. And so we're properly budgeting money in this year's budget in order to meet those requirements. And I just threw in an estimation for 2021, what additional impacts the new town hall might have on the operating budget. And so there will be some additional custodial staffing. It'll be important to set money aside for building maintenance. This will be a facility that we own, that we won't be renting, and so we'll want to continually invest in that facility, and then the bond repayment. So the estimated impact in 2021 is primarily the custodial and building maintenance costs. And there's more information, the details of those numbers are available at barrington.nh.gov/town-hall. So in conclusion, the approved 2019 budget was $7.124 million. The proposed 2020 budget is $7.3 million. The difference is $176,000 or 2.48%. And as it was indicated earlier, the last scheduled payment for the middle school bond is October of 2022. Happy to take any questions, and I believe the select board or ABC would be happy to speak to it as well.
Any comments from the select board? Or from the ABC? No? Okay. Anybody out there have any questions? Charlie?
Charter Week, Scooten Pond Road. Mike Clark and I have been having a continuing conversation with Connor regarding the town hall, and we really appreciate all that he's done to help clarify things for us. We had a couple of additional questions. The $1.9 million in theory covers all things, but there were a couple of things that seemed to be ambiguous. In the request for proposal, 3.12 regarding internet cabling, it says the contracted cost for this aspect of the project will not be included in the contract with the select firm, and you've estimated that those costs will be $50,000. Do we have any explanation of where those funds will come from?
So I'd be happy to speak to that again. Obviously, I said I'd be happy to speak to that again. So there's the IT portion of the contract is we contracted specifically with Rockport Technologies for the design and installation of IT improvements. That's still included in the $1.9 million budget, but when we were advertising the request for qualifications for the design build firm, we wanted to let them know up front that we didn't intend for them to bring their own IT consultant on, that we had somebody chosen already. But the budget number, the 50,000, the estimate 50 to 100,000, is included in the 1.9 million. So in one of the more recent emails that I had sent you, I'd indicated the approximate budget amounts for the different portions of the project, and the 100,000 set aside for IT adds up to that 1.9 million. So the language in the RFQ is specifically designed to inform the folks putting in for the project, which Carino Construction was selected, but specifically was included so that they knew that they weren't bringing that the town was making that selection, and that wouldn't be part of their contract specifically.
So their proposed budget of $1.9 million also falls into that $50,000?
The $1.9 million proposed budget was the town's proposed budget. So with design build, the building committee and folks sat down and decided what we needed to build a town hall. We put that out there, and the request for qualifications, which you're citing, indicates to the design-build contractors interested in the project that the 1.9 million is the all-in budget, the design and construction for the entire building, site work, construction, et cetera. And so it was important at that time to make them aware that there were aspects of that they won't be having primary control over, like the IT portion.
Great, thanks. By the way, I want to be clear, Mike Clark and I both support this project. We think it's a wonderful idea, it needs to be done.
I would also like just to
I
would like to further comment on that this was, when we talked about IT, the technology committee did a very thorough review on it and also presented that to the board, and the mindset behind that was this really was done as a way to make sure that there wasn't additional cost to the town, because using the analogy, it gives us one throat to choke, because we didn't want to get in a situation where we have an IT contractor who is pointing at a builder saying, well, they did that, and the builder pointing at the contractor saying they don't know what they're talking about, and you've got two people doing this.
Yeah.
It kept it all in one person's hands, and with a set budget rolled into that 1.9 to make sure that we didn't run into those problems moving forward. So it was a very thoughtful process to do it that way.
Yeah. And one other question, if we might. When we had this discussion with you regarding the site preparation, and you had indicated that the site preparation costs would be relatively small because you were expecting the developer to use the site for materials collection and equipment. But it would probably be more than a year before they would be done with that project. Does that mean that we won't be starting building in March, or will we be delaying this project by a year, or will that issue disappear and the construction company will simply proceed to prepare the lot?
So I guess those two items aren't mutually exclusive. So to your first point, the developer intends on leveling and clearing all of the commercial lots and, quite frankly, all of the residential lots, adding the value there that the developer is looking for. For the town hall lot, one of the benefits that the town will experience as not having additional cost is that when the road's being built, using the town hall lot as a staging area for that road construction will help level that lot and reduce the site costs that we would have. One of the other things that will drastically reduce the site costs is the building isn't intended to be sprinkled, and so cistern supporting a sprinkler system, a commercial grade sprinkler system for a building that size would be between $100,000 and $200,000 conservatively, and so that saves with the site costs as well. And so to your point about construction timeline, so certainly the final approval from the planning board and the construction of the road would preclude the town from starting construction. We're still on the timeline we anticipated last year, and we anticipate to start and finish construction this year.
In March this year?
I mean, I'm not going to say March exactly. We intend to start.
But it will begin this year.
All right.
So the bid from Carreno will be valid. I was concerned if we had to wait a year whether or not they would honor that bid, but so that seems to be clear now.
Sure.
But thanks a lot.
Any other comments on Article 5? If not, Article 5 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 6, Green Hill Road Bridge Replacement. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2 million for the purpose of replacing the bridge on Green Hill Road over the Isinglass River, and to accept $1,600,000 from the New Hampshire Department of Transportation Bridge Fund, with the remainder of $400,000 to come from the unassigned fund balance, and no amount to be raised by taxation. This special warrant article will be a non-lapsing appropriation per RSA 32:7, Roman numeral 6, and will not lapse until the replacement of the Green Hill Road Bridge is completed or December 31, 2023, whichever is sooner. Majority vote required, and this appropriation is in addition to warrant Article 5, the operating budget article. This article is recommended by the Select Board 3-0 and the ABC 5-0. This article will have no impact on 2020 property taxes. Any comments from the Select Board? Tracy?
So we've used the word infrastructure often throughout the morning. This is another one of the needed projects that need to take place within our town. The State Bridge Aid project would affect the 80% of funding coming in fiscal year 2022. It will replace what is, it says single lane bridge, it's more like 1.5. You have to hold your breath as you're going over it and hope your car sucks in with you. So there'll be 2 12-foot travel lanes when the construction project is complete. The road will be leveled and will be raised 3 feet. It will straighten the intersection of the CB Bridge Road. So total project cost, this is estimated, $1,954,079.96. That's 2019 dollars. And the town's portion is the 20% of $400,000 from the fund balance. No future tax impact is expected on this project. I will tell you a quick funny story. I said to Connor one day on the way to a meeting, when somebody flashes their high beams at you, doesn't it mean they're telling you you're allowed to go? So I approached this bridge heading home one day at dusk and someone flashed their high beams at me. So I proceeded to cross this bridge. And then the large truck on the other side beeped at me and gestured in a way that was not nice. And I thought, maybe I've got it wrong. Maybe when you flash high beams, I'm supposed to wait. So I had to come back and ask Connor if maybe I was interpreting driving wrong all these 52 years or so. I wasn't.
EBC, any comments? No? Any comments from the floor? Ron? Peter?
I think an important part of the discussion, both at the select board and the ABC, was that this is the last bridge we hope we're raising money for right away. We don't anticipate we're going to have another request of this size next year. And again, I think it's important to note that $400,000 certainly is a lot of money, but it is a necessary expenditure. And again, we don't anticipate anything at that level next year.
Any other comments? Yep.
Susan Gaudiello, Franklin Pierce Highway. This is just a question for information. It's a large amount of money to be taken out of the fund balance, and I know there are other articles that are not being taken out of fund balance this year. I'm just interested in what the percentage will be left in the fund balance, assuming all of the articles pass.
It's a great question. So it's something we've talked a lot about at the select board meetings and with the advisory budget committee for that very point. And so all of the capital reserve contributions this year are proposed to come from unassigned fund balance. The only article that would have a tax rate impact on the ballot this year will be the library project as the future bond repayment. And so the impact to unassigned fund balance, if all articles are supported by voters, would bring the percentage somewhere in the high 11.8 or 9% of the total operating expenditures for the town, which includes the school. And so the target is 12.5%. And so the select board and the advisory budget committee were thoughtful through the process of if they were comfortable moving in the 11.8, 11.9 range. The reason it's an estimate is because we still haven't finalized what the addition to unassigned fund balance is from 2019. That will have a little bit of an impact, but that'll bring us slightly below the targeted midpoint of the range of 12.5%, but all involved indicated that it was still a comfortable position.
Charlie?
I'd just like to make a historical point. For many years, the capital reserve funds were all funded by taxation. And in 2008, when the 2008 crash occurred, those were on the ballot. And the selectmen stood outside the polls and asked people to vote them down because we weren't even sure there was going to be a banking system. And so we need to be concerned about how far we use these funds and how we replenish them and whatnot. And we might want to consider in the future how we're going to handle capital reserves in a way that is more more direct to what our costs are as citizens.
Any other comments on Article 6? If not, Article 6 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 7, Highway Heavy Equipment Capital Reserve. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $100,000 to be added to the Highway Heavy Equipment Capital Reserve Fund previously established. The sum to come from unassigned fund balance with no amount to be raised from taxation. Majority vote required. This appropriation is in addition to warrant Article 5, the operating budget article. This article is recommended by the Select Board 3-0 and the ABC 5-0. This article will have no impact on 2020 property taxes. Select Person Bailey.
Thank you. This article we did a lot of time on this article for the Highway Department with the ABC, the Highway Department, and with the Select Board to put together a plan for the future for the capital reserve to replace the six-wheel drive dump truck, the one-ton pickup truck, and the 30-year-old grader. What we found, what was doing that, is that we didn't have enough money, or would not have enough money at the appropriate time to replace some of this equipment. So in the essence, to help us not have a large sum in the years down the road, we are requesting the contribution of $100,000. As stated earlier, it will be coming out of the fund balance. Thank you.
ABC, any comments? Nope. Okay. Comments from the floor? Don't see any. Okay. Article 7 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 8, Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $75,000 to be added to the Bridge Capital Reserve Fund previously established. The sum to come from unassigned fund balance with no amount to be raised from taxation. Such funds may be expended for the purposes of the fund and may be used to apply for 80% state funding from the New Hampshire Bridge Aid Program for related work. Majority vote required. This appropriation is in addition to warrant Article 5, and this article is recommended by the Select Board 3-0 and the ABC 5-0. This article will have no impact on 2020 property taxes. Select Person Air.
Yes. When previous town administrator, I suggested we raise it up and stuff because severe weather, climate control and stuff, the engineers have to go through other precautions now. The expenses going up. So for us to get the grant, we have to proceed to do it. There's 3 projects coming up: Old Settlers culvert replacement, and then Young Road near the causeway near the boat launch, and then Pond Hill. There's a culvert replacement near Daniel Carter. So we need to set this money aside. There's more thought into it and stuff, with storm management runoff and stuff, dealing with the water and stuff. And it's not getting cheaper, so just help offset the future expenses. Thank you.
Thanks. ABC, any comments? Nope. Anybody from the floor? Yes.
Carolyn Robbins, Chesley Drive. I have kind of, it's not really a question, it is kind of a question about this article, but just kind of a general question also. It appears that all of the votes were just 3 members of the select board voting on all of this. And so if I assume that all these votes were the same day, my assumption is 1 person was absent and still 1 person's voting present for every single thing that we did. Is that something that is public knowledge? Can we know who that was? Can that person comment to why they didn't vote for or against anything the entire day?
Mr. Yeager?
Board president was myself. And then I ran on people's voice and stuff. And I have to weigh everything out and stuff. And I do not have to vote. I have to there. With the best interest and stuff, I don't have to state and go on every opinion. It's in the rules of the state.
So you're choosing not to tell us why you didn't vote for anything?
Right, I up to the A and A. And it's in the,
I'm not arguing with your right to do it, I was just asking for a reason behind it. Thank you.
George?
And Madam, we also had one individual that was excused for sickness. That's the reason why we had 3-0.
Yes, I think that was mentioned earlier. I was just curious about the present vote.
Stated for this item.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments from the floor? If not, Article 8 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 9, Fire Truck Capital Reserve. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $55,000 to be added to the Fire Truck Capital Reserve Fund previously established. The sum to come from unassigned fund balance with no amount to be raised from taxation. Majority vote required. This appropriation is in addition to warrant Article 5, the operating budget article. This article is recommended by the Select Board 3-0 and the ABC 5-0. This article will have no impact on 2020 property taxes. Select Person Knapp.
So this fund was established in 1988. It has a current balance of $481,539 in it. The requested contribution of $55,000 is focused on having the intended purpose of saving for large fire apparatus. The planned future use is replacing the 1995 International Tanker in 2020 and 2023, upgrading our forestry truck in 2024, our 2008 ambulance, and so on and so forth, 2026, 2027, 2030, 2032, all looking at increased equipment. Anybody who has looked into or priced fire apparatus understands how expensive they are, so it is our fiduciary responsibility to make sure we are saving appropriately for it so that we don't have a tax impact. Thank you.
ABC, any comments?
One of the reasons we voted for this is actually a little higher than it was originally asked for, is because as we calculated out about 7 or 8 years, because the fire chief made a very appropriate look at our equipment requirements, we're going to run out of money here in about 10 years, so we thought we would start increasing the savings so that there won't be this huge impact when the last piece of equipment is needed. Thank you.
Any comments from the floor? Yes. Fire Chief Rick Walker.
So just to give a little bit of heads up, and I appreciate the board's consideration in the increased prices. We're due the first of the week to submit our bid package to the vendors to replace the 95 International truck. Our truck committee decided that it was in our best interest, the community's best interest, the department's best interest to do a what we call a chassis off restoration. So back in 1994 when we built that tanker, we went with a poly plastic body on that. That's served us well. A number of vendors have looked at it and determined that it's really in our best interest to go ahead and use that body again. So our bid package is going to include the tanker will go to the vendor, they'll pull the body off, they'll put a chassis underneath it, put a brand new pump on it. The rough numbers we're getting right now, with budget numbers we've submitted to the selectmen, are about $250,000. If we replace the truck, made that one go away and put a brand new one in the station, it's probably about $350,000. So we're happy that we're able to put the truck in and save the taxpayers about $100,000 there by hoping that we're able to leave some money in that fund for the next purchase. Just want to bring to your attention that in 2026 would be the year that our back piece or our second due frontline engine will be replaced. Today's dollars, if we replace that engine today in 2020,
them numbers are running about $550,000 to $600,000. So, you know, unfortunately, you know, dusting the crystal ball off, I'm thinking when it's time to replace that truck, it's going to be around $700,000, which is a lot of money. So you will see, we have been looking, I think the Budget Committee's recommendation to the selectmen is that over the next few years, we'll go up $5,000 a year for a request in that fund. And in 2 or 3 or 4 years, we look at the numbers every year, but, you know, we may need to make a little bit more, you know, a little closer. Thank you.
Hello, Nicholas Stineff, Beauty Hill Road. I just have a question about process. I see that you need $55,000. My question is, why not just ask it for in taxes? There's so many things on here that say that they're going to be tax neutral because we're pulling money out of the reserve fund. If the fire department needs $55,000 and they ask the voters for that, I think that people understand that you guys are doing your due diligence, that you're asking for money that's necessary. It feels a little disingenuous to say that it costs nothing because you already raised the taxes, and at some point you're going to have to come back to us and replenish that fund. So, I just don't know why you don't just ask us for the money.
It's a great question. So the unassigned fund balance is comprised of 2 primary sources. One, unexpended appropriations. So the operating budget that's approved at the end of the year, that money is still appropriated by the voters and goes into unassigned fund balance. And so the second primary contribution comes from revenues in excess of projections. So that's not property tax revenue, but all other revenue sources. We have to estimate those revenues, and if we collect more, the excess goes into that fund. Only voters, only town meeting is able to spend money from that fund, except if there's an emergency expenditure can be approved by DRA. So asking voters to spend from that fund is the only way to spend from that fund, and if we didn't, then that fund would just continue to grow. And so in previous years, there have been larger articles proposed to be funded by unassigned fund balance and have been turned down by voters. And so that money doesn't go anywhere, that money stays in that fund. So it's somewhat of a political question that you ask, and the Select Board Advisory Budget Committee can certainly speak to it about putting every article on the tax rate and presenting articles that way. The big picture, it's very important to set money aside in capital reserve accounts for those future expenditures so we don't get hit with those big spikes when we do need to make the expenditure. And so by using the unassigned fund balance as a funding source, which grows some years a little, some years a little bit more, using that as a funding source and encouraging voters to support those articles to set money aside, like I said, is somewhat of a political decision, but that's certainly the tradition in Barrington and has helped set money aside for those big expenditures.
That makes sense. Oh, please.
I was going to say there are 2 other kind of key items around that. When you look at it, part of this is and I'll tell you because I got called out on it earlier in the year, and rightfully so, by our fire chief, is not to pit articles against each other. You don't want to say we're going to pay for this, but we're not going to pay for this because we know the voters they're not going to say no to this article. So we don't want to do that, and rightfully so for him raising that concern, because I very much was thinking about it that way early in the process. The other piece of it is it really helps if we're using that unassigned fund balance and we're using it responsibly. It really helps control that impact to the tax rate. That way, year over year, is voters ebb and flow in what they're voting to approve or not approve. You don't see these massive spikes in your tax rate that then balance back out or drop back down next year. So it creates a very stabilized tax rate, which I think is what we all kind of want, is you want to come in and you want to know, okay, my taxes are going to be fairly consistent year after year. I plan for that, I budget for that. And this is a way to ensure that we do that without hitting you hard in the pocket one year and then not as hard the next year.
Those are excellent answers, and I appreciate those. I would just follow up with, do you think that what you just explained to me is transparent enough to all the voters that they understand that this is how you plan to do things, that money will go to the side and then you'll come back and reappropriate it. It doesn't feel as transparent. Like if that what you just said, if everybody in town knows that, and I was the last one to find out, that's fantastic, because I think it's a totally reasonable way to have a plan to have a stable tax rate. But if you could, if that's not the case, then I think it would be worth endeavoring to make that more clear to all the taxpayers that this is our plan for how to stabilize your tax rate. It involves putting this money to the side and planning to spend it in this way. I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Definitely welcome your input on how to do that effectively as somebody who is learning about that now. Certainly things change with different select boards, things change with different advisory budget committees and the recommendations there. I think one thing that the select board and ABC have done really well this year is bring that conversation on unassigned fund balance to the forefront, explain through the entire process, which again, you're only going to benefit from that if you have hours on end to spend following every budget meeting and things like that. But what I'm hearing is it might be beneficial to have some better summary documents of what that process looks like from a big picture, so folks that don't have those hours on end to follow every meeting are able to digest some material that exists that summarizes how the process works.
Thank you.
Nicholas, would you spell your last name for the record?
Yes, it's P as in Paul, H as in Henry, A-N as in Nancy, E-U-F as in Frank.
You guessed it right. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Rebecca Butcher. I'm on Nubo Lake Road. With all due respect for the past conversation, I think this is great to have more transparency on the unassigned fund balance. I would just like to say for the record, and I think the select board can add to this, but we should know that a large sum of money was used from the unassigned fund balance for funding the town hall last year. This year, the library, which was putting forth a similar large capital expenditure, wanted to have on the warrant the opportunity to also use some of the unassigned fund balance. There was quite a lot of conversation about that and recognition that there might be some confusion in putting that to the voters because there would be multiple warrant initiatives, I believe. But I just think for the record, we need to know that there are a lot of things being put toward this unassigned fund balance, and it does look a little political at times. We have to be mindful of that. If there are years when some groups are able to use large amounts of unassigned fund balance for things that they want to do, when other groups who feel similarly strongly and have a large following of people in the town who also want that, who are not able to use that fund balance. So I think we just need to be very transparent, and I think in following up that last gentleman's conversation, we should work together to help the voters understand how that money can help balance out our tax rates over time, but should be used in mindful ways to support all of the people of town. Thank you.
Any other comments specifically on Article 9? If not, Article 9 will appear on the ballot as written. Oh, there's one from Dan.
I'll take the blame for the town hall and stuff. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I know I work hard for my money and stuff, and balance and stuff. So, with the help of the fellow board members and thing, I thought in my mind, how can we present this to the voters and not have additional impacts if the cost of living is up? And ironically, it worked out with the rent we're paying, the human level funded. It won't be perfect, cost of living 2-3%, but it should be the bond payment. It should be additional tax payments. And that's why we want to put money towards something else. This is going to be very much level funded. And it works out. I'm not smart enough to figure out the dollar amounts, but the board and staff was able to help me out with it. Thank you.
Okay, Article 10. Emergency Communications Upgrades Capital Reserve. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to be added to the Emergency Communications Upgrades Capital Reserve Fund previously established This sum to come from unassigned fund balance with no amount to be raised from taxation. Majority vote required. This appropriation is in addition to warrant Article 5, the operating budget article. This article recommended by the Select Board 3-0 and the ABC 5-0. This article will have no impact on 2020 property taxes. Tracy.
We had a fund established in 2005 specifically for emergency communication upgrades, knowing that they'll take place over time. Current balance is $156,000. The requested contribution is $50,000 this year. We're saving for both the communication tower and radio equipment upgrades that will allow us to both continue to operate our emergency services, but will also allow us, if I understand correctly, to work in a mutual aid capacity with other communities. Imagine if you have all of the equipment for fire, police, and EMS, but you can't actually communicate on the ground during an incident. So the planned use is for repeater and radio upgrades. We'd have a shared frequency with the towns of Lee and Madbury, and our plan is to replace all 15-year-old portable radios.
Comments from the ABC? Nope. Okay. Comments from the floor? Rick Walker.
Thank you, Tracy, for the explanation. So the emergency, I just wanted to add one little caveat. Highway Department is considered emergency services as well, because sometimes that gets lost, but I'll tell you, in the middle of a damn snowstorm, that plow truck's flying around, making sure that I can get an ambulance or a fire truck to where I need to go. I think that's as big a deal as me trying to get there with to provide help to people that need it. So that when we established that fund years ago, we did emergency services, but we were clear that we talked to the attorney that that would include the highway department as well, so that we would incorporate any upgrades they need to do. The state very generously, federal government very generously back in around 2001 had a grant program in which all the communities in the state were awarded a number of portable and mobile radios. Problem being was the state got them radios and sat on them for a little over 2 years until they figured out how they were going to get rid of them, and then distribute them, so they were 2 years old by the time most of the communities got them. Since then, these radios have gone out of service. If one goes bad, we send it back to the manufacturer. If they have the parts to fix it, they do. If not, they send it back with a note, throw it in the junk pile. Fortunately, we haven't had any. We've been able to fix ours, but we started putting this fund together. The beautiful tower that you see up by the library food pantry building was put in out of that fund when the town hall came down, the old school came down. We need to do, we're looking at repeater upgrades for the highway department. They're having some communication issues. We do need to invest in the infrastructure, the current technology that we're using. The copper line system is going out of vogue, if you will, and there's very few telephone people left around that can work on these. Telephone company has advised us that we need to be looking at different stuff. So by the time we're looking at replacing radios, I was looking at doing them all at once. The board's preference is to replace a few at a time, so that we don't have to replace 40 radios all again in a number of years. So rough numbers, today's numbers, it's going to be about $300,000 to get everything done. So you're going to see us working over the next 5 to 6 years to continue adding to this fund so that we can get these projects completed. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, Article 10 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 11, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $10,000 to be added to the Fire and Rescue Equipment Capital Reserve Fund previously established. The sum to come from unassigned fund balance with no amount to be raised from taxation. Majority vote required. This appropriation is in addition to warrant Article 5. This article is recommended by the Select Board 3-0 and the ABC 5-0. This article will have no impact on 2020 property taxes. George Bailey.
Thank you. Again, this article was established in 2012. Has a current balance of $38,892, and the current request is for an additional $10,000, and it's to, as we said before, to stop the budget spikes. And the equipment that they're looking to put this for is the exhaust vent system for the apparatus bay, the cardiac monitors, and you see the power cot. The power cot will be used for the ambulance. It's just another way to save ahead of time and make it work for all of us. Thank you.
ABC, any comments? Okay, comments from the floor? See any? Okay, Article 11 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 12, Tricentennial Celebration Expendable Trust. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $5,000 to be added to the Tricentennial Celebration Expendable Trust, previously established. This sum to come from unassigned fund balance with no amount to be raised from taxation. Majority vote required. This appropriation is in addition to warrant Article 5. This article is recommended by the Select Board 3-0 and the ABC 5-0. This article will have no impact on 2020 property taxes. Dan?
Yes, this is money we're going to continue each year for seed fund money for the Tricentennial. The committee's working real hard. They want to do more fundraising, special events for the party and fireworks and stuff. So it's going to be a cost to have this event, and it's the 300th, so I think it's going to be special for the town. So a lot of people are working hard on it. Thank you.
Thank you. ABC, anything? Nope. Celebrator-in-Chief Rick Walker.
For the record, I wasn't here in I was too young. I was like a year old in 1972. Just don't look at my hair, I'm kidding. For somebody that was here in 1972, and the 250th anniversary was a pretty special deal. And we have a core committee of about 10 residents here in town that are working diligently toward having a 300th anniversary celebration. We're actually as excited to get this up, and we're as excited as the library people are to get a new library. We think this is going to be a really big deal, something special. We have the committee right now is working with the idea that we're going to break off into smaller committees, and we're going to tip over every rock. There won't be any residents, any groups or anything in town that we're not going to harass between now and summer of 2022, so that we can have a celebration that we can all be proud of. So what we're asking for is putting money away. Primarily, these funds are going to be used for the, likely to be used for the fireworks celebration. Rough numbers, fireworks cost about $1,000 a minute, today's dollars. So we felt that if we had to spend a lot of time doing fundraising for 20 minutes or a half hour's worth of fireworks, that would take away from what we really want to do, which is have a good time during the year-long celebration of 2022. Our intention is to have something going on every month of the year. Probably start at the soiree of 21, which is a big deal. Roll through 22 with a big celebration in the summer of 22, and finish it off with something big at the end of the year. So we're excited, and we're going to tip over a lot of rocks to get people involved. So thank you.
Rick, any other comments? If not, Article 12 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 13, Cemetery Capital Reserve. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $5,000 to be added to the Cemetery Capital Reserve previously established. The sum to come from unassigned fund balance with no amount to be raised from taxation. This is equal to the amount the town collected in 2019 from the sale of cemetery lots and other cemetery revenue. Majority vote required. This appropriation is in addition to warrant Article 5, the operating budget article. This article is recommended by the Select Board 3-0, and and the Advisory Budget Committee 5-0. This article will have no impact on 2020 property taxes. Andy?
Yep, the original warrant was established back in 2013. The current balance in the fund is $60,172. As Ron noted, the requested contribution is $5,000, which are the collected revenue from 2019. And it's the money ends up being used for expansion and maintenance of the cemetery. Some of you who've been in town a while, a couple of years ago, may remember some of the areas being stumped out and cleared out, preparing more plots for future expansion. That's it.
ABC, any comments? Nope. Comments from the floor? Yes, Roger.
Roger Gingrich, Peabody Way. I was doing a little bit of research on electricity use in Barrington and where the money comes from that. And the only subcategory that I found electricity in the budget and a line item was a cemetery. And it piqued my interest. Does anyone know where electricity use for the cemetery comes from?
Rick will talk to that.
What little bit of electricity uses for the water over there, and trust me, that's one of the first phone calls the town hall gets if we don't have the water turned on when people are ready to, so it's, I don't know, it's about $200 a year, give or take.
Rick is a cemetery commissioner. Okay, any other comments? If not, Article 13 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 14, Library Technology Capital Reserve. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $3,000 to be added to the Library Technology Fund Capital Reserve previously established. The sum to come from unassigned fund balance with no amount to be raised from taxation. Majority vote required. This is in addition to the operating budget article. This article is recommended by the Select Board 3-0 and the ABC 5-0. This article will have no impact on 2020 property taxes. And Dan Ayer will speak about that.
Yeah, this doesn't ensure the future growth of libraries. Obviously, you'll have to do upgrades and stuff. Is that money available? Because things change in time. You have to keep with the times.
Okay, ABC, any comments? Nope. Okay, any comments from the floor? Okay, Article 14 will appear as written. If nobody objects, let's take a 5-minute break. I know those chairs are getting hard. Might need to jump around and warm up a little. We start at 11:15.
I would go to the song place.
In a public setting, you have to ask the moderator. Okay? What are people going to do? Let's think about this. If all of a sudden we're the highest rental exemption, where are you going to live? So that's our impact, but right, that's our territory. Well, you and I both know our lifestyle selling. So I just think it's something we need to consider long term. And do this in just a responsible way and still support our veterans, which is why we implemented change. Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's well, so what you'd be asking for, what I'm understanding is, if it wasn't total, then ultimately, you know, the VA benefit is not federally taxable. Right. And so if we then couple that with the elderly and the other $450 veterans exemption, you know, we need a choice for everyone who has this type of income. We need to be planning for the entire community and still be mindful. So I have some really no, I hear you. It will come up, and you can ask the moderator when we begin the discussion to begin discussion to if he can decide. He can decide we can't do it. He's in charge. You're in charge. So we're not all right? Yeah. I just found mine. Yeah. Someone they had like 16 big bites on it. I was like, oh my god.
Nice job. Okay, recess is over. Let's get back to the good stuff. Select board. People are pretty brief, actually. They just have a lot of good stories. It's a one-time a year. Article 14, are we ready?
Okay, let's go. Let's go.
There we go, Article 14, no, 16. How about 16?
16, Trump.
All right, 15. I'm jumping around, just to keep you awake. We're on Article 15, solar energy exemption. To see if the town will vote to modify the provisions of RSA 72:61 through 64 inclusively, which provide for an optional property tax exemption from the property's assessed value for property tax purposes for persons owning real property, which is equipped with solar energy systems intended for use at the immediate site. Such property tax exemptions shall be in the amount equal to 100% of the assessed value of qualifying solar energy system equipment under these statutes. This article would replace the existing $5,000 solar exemption. Majority vote required. This article is recommended by the Select Board 3-0. This article is recommended by the ABC 4-1. Andy Knapp will speak about this one.
Just as a way to continue supporting renewable energies and make sure that folks were able to get full value out of their solar equipment. They we supported amending it to make sure that the current exemption of $5,000 was raised so that the proposed exemption would be 100% of the value of the equipment. That way you didn't get capped out at a $5,000 value on your equipment, and then be assessed higher on that as well. So this was a way just to make sure that it was a net neutral impact to folks, and it really promoted the use of renewable energies.
ABC, any comments on Article 15? Nope, okay. Any comments from the floor? Robert?
Robert Drew, Stagecoach Road. Just a couple of comments. I understand that the purpose of this is to encourage renewable energy, but it seems to be just a select few. I don't think there's too many windmills in town, but that's another option. Geothermal, a lot of people can super insulate the house, put new windows and new doors on. Do they also get exclusion for that or a tax rebate for that? Because a lot of people would like to use solar, but they can't. Either they can't afford to, or they're not in a physical location to be able to utilize solar, like myself. Also, when you install the solar array in your property, that's going to increase your property value, so it's going to be worth more when you resell it. So it appears to be that we're just selecting a few people that can afford to put solar on and have the location to put solar on, and excluding the rest of the people that utilize other methods or can't use that method to use renewable energy. Thank you.
So in reference to this, because I think it was the person who brought it forward to the select board as a warrant article, the importance of this was we were trying to weigh what other towns were doing, and we were trying to be certain that our current town residents that are utilizing solar did not get limited to just a $5,000 exemption for the value of their solar arrays. And so utilizing verbiage from other like communities was why the focus of this particular warrant article is on the solar exemption.
But do you also give, if anybody would have wind energy, geothermal, super insulating their home, do they also get a tax rebate for those issues too?
I can't speak to
So
that.
that's a great question. So the credits and exemptions offered at a municipal level are only those allowable by the state legislature, by the RSAs. And so the same RSA that allows municipalities to institute a solar exemption also offers one for wind-powered energy exemption. Historically, there was an exemption for wood heat, which I know Barrington had. So if you had wood heat, there was an exemption for that for some assessed value. For the solar energy exemption specifically, Barrington for a number of years has had a solar energy exemption since 2001, and that $5,000 value was just a shot in the dark of, hey, this is what we think it might add in value. The truth is, until the 2019 revaluation, the solar energy equipment folks had on their property didn't add any value. So the assessing community in New Hampshire found it difficult to assign a value because they didn't know if the property was owned or leased or whether it was actually generating any solar energy or not. And so the assessing community until 2019 in Barrington wasn't sure what kind of a value to assign. So previously, even if you had a $35,000 solar array, even if it did add some value to your home, our assessors didn't assign a value because there was no methodical way to arrive at a number. And so the adjustment from $5,000 to 100% of the value is as the assessing practices change over time and the assessing community is able to assign a value for the solar energy equipment that may range from a $5,000 installation to a $50,000 residential installation, that this exemption says that added value, you won't pay extra taxes on that. And so it's town meeting's opportunity to offer any other creditor exemption. This one's specifically about solar, but to your point about super insulation or geothermal, I'm not aware of a statute that allows an exemption or credit for those types of efficiency options.
It just seems fair to, if you do one, you should be able to do all of them. So, thank you.
Andy? I'm sorry, Dan.
I don't have anything.
I know, you guys look so...
I know you get rebates from Eversource and stuff, and then doing an energy-tight house, you burn less fossil fuels and stuff, so you help the environment, and then on your return at the end, you sell your house, you can gain it there.
Okay, Matt?
Well, as you already know, I'm Matt Town from Ayers Lake. Speaking now from the perspective of an owner of a 26-panel solar array, one comment I might make in terms of the prior speaker is that the power that's generated from our array goes back into the pool, which serves to generally lower and put downward pressure on the overall rates charged to all of our citizens by just simply increasing the pool of power that's available to us. The less power we take out of the NEP pool or the New England power pool, the better off we are, since the overhead costs from the NEP pool are borne by those who take the most power from them. So the more we generate on our own, the less we draw from that pool, and the less we have to subsidize this New England power pool. So it is a net benefit. It's subtle, but it's there. I might point out that on the larger arrays, just to give you scale, the Stratford County complex, the Riverside Nursing Home and the court systems and the House of Corrections, they spent $380,000 in electricity last year to run that, and they're hoping they can recoup the entire amount by solar. So there's a real substantial benefit to encouraging solar power, however that can happen.
Holly Grossman, 435 Scruton Pond Road. What I want to say about solar, I have a solar array and 18 panels. But what I learned was that my solar array produces power, and I have extra that it's producing, and it's going locally, which I think is really important. It doesn't need to be transmitted into the system. It's going to go to my neighbors, and I like that about it. I love to see solar all over the town of Barrington and being used locally. It's a benefit to the whole system.
John?
Specific to this article here, the real issue is the assessment is supposed to be equal to what the value of the house was for establishing stuff when it gets sold in the future. The solar does add value to a home, but it wasn't being picked up. So when they do valuations, the state comes back and it says you're not valuing this correctly because it's sold for more than it was valued at. So now having the equal value to what it sells for makes the valuation process through the state equal, and the town's always had the solar exemption. So what this article does is it continues with that exemption, but yet you're showing the true value of what the home's worth.
Any other comments on Article 15?
Mr. Moderator, the only last thing I'll add to Mr. Drew's comment, so it's RSA 72:37-B. Those are the local option exemptions. I can write it down for you later. So it is wood heating systems is 1, solar energy systems is 2, and wind powered energy systems is 3. So the statutes allow those 3 separate exemptions at this time.
Okay. Article 15 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 16, elderly exemption. To see if the town will vote to modify the provisions of RSA 72:39A for elderly exemption from property tax based on assessed value for qualified taxpayers to be as follows. For a person 65 years of age up to 75 years, $85,000. For a person 75 years of age up to 80 years, $127,500. For a person 80 years of age or older, $161,500. To qualify, the person must have been a New Hampshire resident for at least 3 consecutive years, own the real estate individually or jointly, or if the real estate is owned by such person's spouse, they must have been married to each other for at least 5 consecutive years. In addition, the taxpayer must have a net income of not more than $36,000, or if married, a combined net income of less than $50,000, and own net assets not in excess of $125,000, excluding the value of the person's residence. Majority vote required. This article is recommended by the Select Board 3-0 and the ABC 5-0. Tracy Hardikoff will speak.
So this particular article was brought forward again by me. I recognized at the last deliberative session that a few people with fixed incomes that were in their retirement years were opposed to some of the infrastructure projects. And I wanted to be certain when we looked at elderly exemptions that we were applying them uniformly across all groups. And the one area that was not in line with the rest of the areas was the single elderly exemption. So we have now placed this in alignment so that percentage-wise it's reflecting uniformity across the exemptions. So I'm hoping that we'll find support for that, but the purpose is to just simply maintain consistency with the county and state averages on the exemptions here in Barrington.
ABC, any comments? Nope. Okay, any comments from the floor? Don't see any. Not many elderly people still here, I guess. Okay. Article 16 will appear on the warrant as written. Okay, if you've been reading ahead, you might have noticed that Articles 17 and 19 are about the same thing. It's just two different amounts are proposed. So if it's okay with you folks, I'd like to have us consider both of those together and decide what we're going to do about them, and then we'll come back to Article 18 after. Unless you're really anxious to talk about Keno, we can stop and have that after. So if you don't object, we'll consider those together. And then hopefully the group can work out how you want these to read ultimately. So I'll read Article 17 first, and there's a little word correction in here that I would like to propose that perhaps we can make an amendment to. It's just the word shall be should become the word to. Anyway, shall the town vote to change the tax credit for service-connected total disability, this is a petitioned article, by the way, for service-connected total disability upon adoption by the town pursuant to RSA 72:35, Roman numeral 1-A, to an amount of $4,000. The optional tax credit for service-connected total disability shall replace the standard tax credit of $2,000 in its entirety and shall not be an addition thereto. Majority vote required. This article is not recommended by the Select Board by a vote of 2-1. This article is recommended by the ABC by a vote of 3-2. Article 19 is essentially the same thing, but that recommends changing to a dollar amount of $2,550. So we can have the petitioner speak first about the petitioned article, and that would be George Bailey.
Thank you very much. I also am the individual that brought forward the Article 19 to the Select Board. They changed the numbers around. 17 and 19, both are at my hand. One is a petition, the other is a Select Board. What has happened is a year ago, January, the state legislature and the governor, they signed into law an amendment to RSA 72:35. In essence, what they did is they raised the article from $2,000 to $4,000. That is for individuals that have been classified by the VA to be totally and permanently disabled. Currently, there are 35 individuals in Barrington, and I must say this, I am one of those 35. I am one of those 35, so please, this is not just for me, it is for the younger people. Also, it takes care of the double amputees. We must realize that in 1975, the draft was stopped and it went for 100% all volunteer service. By the year 1981, everybody that came into the service, including all the academies, starting at that time, was completely volunteer. And so over the years, individuals have been hurt and what have you. Unfortunately, for the members of the town of Barrington, we have numerous individuals who are at 100%, but the VA has not granted them status of total disability, so they don't fall into this. So to get back where I'm at right now, both warrant articles I had put in, the petition and the one to the select board, as no, you change it. You change the price. Change the price to that. And so what happened was there was a change to the articles that came in from 4,000, and it was recommended that we adopt, make a change to Article 17 and Article 19 so that it would have a change. Select Person Hardikoff has agreed to take care of the verbiage. And so the verbiage would be, for all of us to understand, that it would be $2,550 on both articles. This would be a change, and that both of them would change to that, and with the verbiage that Select Person Hardikoff, and I relent to Select Person Hardikoff.
So Article 19 was brought forward after review of the veterans amount for an individual experiencing total service-related disability that has a spouse, with payment from the VA and the exemption from federal taxes for an individual experiencing total service-related disability. Income levels, if they were in a 10% tax bracket, become $41,443. In a 15% bracket, $43,327. And in a 20% bracket, $45,211. And certainly, it becomes important to recognize that all of our veterans are the 1% that do the job that protects the other 99% of us. I am a military spouse currently, have been my entire 28 years of marriage. I brought forward the $2,550 with the recognition that coupled with the other $450 all veterans exemption, that would allow us a $3,000 exemption this year. And I brought this forward with the plan of incremental change so that over the course of 3 years, this select board could continue to introduce a staggered incremental approach to getting to that $4,000. I absolutely support our veterans. I think we have a fiduciary responsibility to put forward change that does not have a huge impact on the rest of our residents while still recognizing total service-related disability and the sacrifices that people have made on our behalf. So I would like to change Article 19 to simply read with a plan for incremental change, and I would like to change Article 17, the amount to $2,550.
I will second that. The other, I thank you, I appreciate it. One of the items that must be known is that the state has said this standard or optional tax credit under this section may be applied only to property which is occupied as the principal place of abode by the disabled individual or surviving spouse. So it does take into consideration the surviving spouse when this comes about. It's a way that we recognize our individuals that have a need for this. It's over the past years I've been involved with ceremonies, which I have since stopped doing because of personal reasons. And I must tell you that it's hard to see, for me to see a young person right now that has entities of any, whether it's 1 or 3, 2, it's there. It's hard to see that. And to recognize that the way our government is set up part right now is that we have all of our children, all of our grandchildren that are susceptible to go there. Even though years ago, the Geneva Convention passed the rules of war that we weren't to use mines, well, now they have a different system that they use. And it causes our young people to get hurt more and more, and a lot of them are total disability. And I'd ask you to really consider passing this motion that will ensure monies that will help them in their endeavor. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Any more discussion on Article 17, first of all?
I believe, Mr. Moderator, that there was a motion and a second put on there to change both those articles to $2,550, and with the verbiage addressed by Select Person Hardikoff.
Right. We just need to see the final. And do you have that, Connor?
Mr. Moderator, I might suggest in consultation with the town's attorney to clean up the language even a little bit more. I know you'll probably want to act on that amendment first. So I would recommend having the language of both articles be identical to avoid confusion with the same dollar amount. And then to one article, it doesn't matter which one, add the sentence, this article, if passed, only takes effect if article number referencing the other one fails to pass. So that does two things. One, the language being identical avoids confusion with voters reading two articles pertaining to the same exact topic. And that adding that sentence to one article would allow any confusion if one article were to pass and the other were to fail, avoid any confusion with DRA on whether or not the town can actually allow that to take effect.
Okay. Would the people who moved and seconded the article be agreeable to those changes?
I would, Mr. Moderator.
I would, Mr. Moderator.
Okay. So do you have the written text of the article that we can vote on?
Working on that, and it'll be on the screen momentarily.
Okay. Any other discussion while they are working on the...
Mr. Moderator?
Yep.
If I may, please. And just to let everybody know that this is not something that's willy-nilly by the state. The state has, this is one of 17 programs that the legislature has set up for the veterans. Now, I know from my practical experience in talking to veterans in this town and in several neighboring towns, that not everybody is aware, specifically this one here. The state has mandated that an individual that is 100% can collect $700 by making an application to their town. But because people in this town went to 2,000 years ago, and hopefully you'll vote this time here to increase it by that extra money will help. But it's just, people need to be aware of what's going on. And my best suggestion to you is to look into your American Legion, VFW, DAV, and other sponsors there to help the individuals out. You must remember, it doesn't just take care of the younger people now. It goes all the way back to individuals from World War II, all the way on up, and it also takes care of the spouse in it, whichever side of it one had, one didn't have an active duty. So I would suggest that you, if you have questions, to go to these organizations, or you can call the State House and talk to the individual there, and you can find all of these items out. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
The discussion at the moment is on the motion to change the wording of the articles, not on the content of the article. So speak to that, Robert, if you can.
Yeah, Robert Drew again. I'm kind of a simple guy at times. Since both of them say the same thing, and I know you're changing one of them to say if this one doesn't pass, why don't we just take whatever procedures needed to withdraw one of them and can't do that?
No, once petitioned, you can't do that.
Okay, just much
it's
simpler for everybody when they go to read it, but, all right.
Now, once an article has been posted on the warrant, it has to appear on the ballot.
Can you amend one of them down to 0, so people won't vote for it?
Well, I think this will be an easier way to deal with it.
So, Mr. Moderator, we have the two articles as amended, ready for presentation if you'd like to address the amendment.
Did you want to speak on the amendment?
I would like to know why they're amending both to $2,550 and not both to $4,000.
George?
I will explain it this way here. We ensure that we start off with a 25, it's not stated 25%, but equals 25% of the 2,000, and at least we're saying that it will go year after year, so we can have that taken care of, so we can ensure that we will have that money for the veterans, whereas if it goes elsewhere, it can be changed as requested, it be changed to nothing. And if it's changed to nothing, the veterans that need that will get nothing, and that's the reason why that was made that way.
Okay, I have one other question. Who are the two members of the select board that voted against the 4,000? Andrew and Tracy.
Correct.
Thank you. And I'm assuming you just voted present. Okay.
Could you state your name, please, for the record?
My name is Todd Titus. I live on Nicholas Way.
Thank you. All right. Connor, can you read the text of Article 17?
Article 17 is proposed to be to see if the town will vote to modify the provisions of RSA 72.35 for an optional tax credit of $25.50 for service-connected total disability on residential property with a plan for future incremental increase. And Article 19 is the same with the addition of a final line which says if this article, if passed, only takes effect if Article 17 fails to pass.
Okay. Would you like to speak on that proposed amendment?
I would.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Bruce Trefethen. I live on Stadium Road in Barrington. I object. I object to changing the amount from $4,000 to $2,550 with two reasons. One is the difference is $1,450, which spread over 35 people. Total impact to the town would be $50,750. Spread across all the properties in the town of Barrington, which I don't have that number. But I believe we're talking pennies on the tax rate. And if we can't stand up for people who sacrificed a good portion of their life, a good portion of their bodies, a giant portion of their future for a few cents apiece to the taxpayers, I think we got a real problem in town. My second objection is to pushing this out over future years, that we bring it back incrementally each year, which would allow each year this same conversation to say, okay, we're going to skip it this year, we'll try it again next year. So to come up with this additional $1,450 to raise to $4,000 total might take a few years or a great number of years, or it may never happen.
In reference to the incremental change, understand that the exemptions here in the town of Barrington are stackable. So the $2,550, along with our all veterans exemption credit, brings it to $3,000. Over the course of the next 2 years, it would increase to $3,500 should that be approved by our residents, and then up to $4,000 in year 3. The purpose of that incremental change was twofold: to get to where we are allowed to go from a state perspective, not required to go, to encourage the recognition of what our veterans have provided for all of us, but also to understand that just because there are 35 total service-related disabilities currently in the town of Barrington, does not mean that in the future, if we are one of the few communities offering a large exemption, that we don't also begin to attract and be impacted by a large number of people moving to our community. So I think we can accomplish with incremental change the goal of this and still have a smaller impact on our residents.
Todd?
I have two questions.
Come close to the mic, Todd.
Sorry, I have two questions. Who on the advisory budget committee voted against Article 17?
Todd, that doesn't pertain to the content.
It does pertain to the content, because I have a follow-on question. I just saw one that answered.
What is your question, sir?
I asked who on the advisory budget committee voted against this Article 17?
I know when our moderator asked about pertinence.
Well, because I have a follow-on question. And actually, I have the same question to you. Did you serve?
No, my wife did, and my brother-in-law has for 27 years.
I understand that. I served. That's why I asked. I already know about you serving under your husband. Did you serve, sir? No. And, of course, the mystery guest on the advisory budget committee didn't answer. And did you serve, Mr. Hyde?
Todd, is there any other discussion among the argument?
It is pertinent. I'm asking who that voted against it served, and that knows the sacrifice that people make. I know George does, and he voted for it.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
may I have a point of order with this? May I discuss the individuals? And I'm in favor of what you're asking, and I'm going to say this to you right now. We would have to pull up the files to see who voted for it and who didn't from the Budget Advisory Committee.
Right.
And so if that information can be provided to you at a later date, but it was not something that was brought forward as to who did it, those minutes.
Actually, one of the gentlemen said he voted against it, and he...
Sir, I would also like to point out that we have one of the highest exemptions currently in the entire state of New Hampshire. We went
I believe you are the 5th highest currently.
And if you look at the entire number of communities, that puts us pretty high on the list. And the fact that we recognize that and also have a plan to incrementally increase it to ensure that we get to the full 4,000 and are doing it in a responsible way for the residents of the community, I think speaks to the fact that we really do respect and value the sacrifice of our service members.
What I'm wondering is, literally, you are talking less than a penny a resident to cover this. Am I correct? For the tax rate, less than a penny a resident.
So I could perform the tax rate calculation. I think the important thing to keep in mind about how exemptions and credits affect the tax rate is we can use past utilization as an estimation for a tax rate impact, but there is no way to know. So the adjustment, what we know right now is that there was 35 service-connected total disability credits issued in 2019. And so the impact, the dollar amount impact to go from the $2,000 to $4,000 would be $70,000. I think you referenced it's close to $50,000, the difference between $2,550 and $4,000.
Actually, that was another party, but I understood that.
Oh, okay, sorry, I apologize, thank you. So I can run the numbers real quick for the tax rate impact, but I think it's important to note that we don't necessarily know that will be the impact next year. There may have been folks who move out of town, move into town. But I can calculate it at 50,000 and at 70,000.
Okay. The other question that goes with it is, by doing it incrementally, you're offering the voters 3 more chances to shoot it down before it goes to the 4,000. Am I correct? Am I correct? Can they shoot down any incremental change after this one if it passes?
The answer to that is yes. The other answer to that is most often residents support veterans initiatives. I cannot even imagine that the Barrington community would not recognize your service and the service of all other veterans and vote these through.
We will see. Okay.
Lisa Titus, Nicholas White. I'm just trying to understand why we're choosing for this to go into an incremental change as opposed to the elderly exemption. There's clearly more elderly people in this town than there are servicemen who are in total disability. I can't wrap my head around that, understanding why one is opposed to the other. And the impact, I would certainly think, everything taking out of the fund balance, I understand we have infrastructure, we have vehicles, et cetera, that have to be dealt with, and they come out of the fund balance. This is not a big impact. It doesn't make sense to me that this is the choice being made.
So, with regard to you covered a lot of territory there, so I'm going to try and parse it out.
Sure.
When you talk about the exemptions, we already have exemptions in place with regard to elderly and folks in that category. Part of this is alignment of that, which is why we're making the adjustment to specifically the single elderly exemption, because when you look at the group that is most impacted by the likelihood of poverty or that realm, and Tracy probably will speak to it far more eloquently than I will, that one specific group has a much more significant impact in that area. When you look at these exemptions from the standpoint of our veterans, there are many other exemptions that already fit into that bucket as opposed to one singular exemption. So when you total it up, the amount of exemptions that are already geared to service-connected disabilities for our veterans ends up being, I believe it's north of like $60,000 worth of income that is exempted already, where that is not the case with a single individual from the elderly exemption standpoint. So to address that aspect of it, there was a very long conversation about this to make sure that we were being very mindful of it at numerous select board meetings. Yes.
To further answer your question, currently for the 450, I'm sorry, what? There we go. So to answer your question on the all veterans credit, which is voted by the individuals, we voted for $450. Countywide average is $446. State average is $356. And currently we have 487 veterans that have applied for that, for a reduction in tax money of $219,150. If we move to the tax credit for the all veterans, that's at $70,000 with 35 people. We also have 3 surviving spouses for an additional $6,000 that are on it. And the average credit in the county is $1,669 for the totally disabled $2,000, and the state average is $1,427. And the state, and then that, in our town we have 35 of us, which is $70,000. And it's a fair question to ask when you make a comparison to the elderly, but you're putting apples and oranges together for 2 different categories. And as you know, I mean, I have fought hard to come this far with it for all of us here, but I do have to respect the rest of the board's reason, and I also have to respect the amount of money that is being lost to the town, but that needs to be made up for by other individuals. And so I had to change my mind. I will tell you that right now. I had to make a change so that I could ensure we could get to the 4,000 by asking the other individuals to go with increments. And it's a more equitable way for the taxpayers of Barrington to do that. And it's satisfies, in my opinion, satisfies both sides. And that's why I have it with you, that there. I hope that satisfies the questions that you're asking.
Oh, I was going to say the math, so the $50,000 difference between the 2550 and 70,000, or the 2550 and 4,000 would be a 4.44 cent impact on the tax rate, which is about $13.32 on a $300,000 property. The $70,000 impact going from 2,000 to 4,000 would be 6.22 cents on the tax rate, and for a $300,000 property would be about $18.66. Again, those are estimates. We don't know who will apply for these credits or exemptions next year, but based on 2019 data, that would be the impact.
Tracy?
I think one of the important factors from a policy perspective of why this has been addressed in an incremental capacity is the recognition that the VA disability benefits are stacked with Social Security disability and also stacked with our elderly exemptions. So say, for instance, we had an elderly member of our community who was total service-related disability and was not married and had no surviving parents or children. They would fall into our elderly exemption category as well as into our veterans category, and chances are at that point would be paying zero in property tax. And again, I'll state this to the ends of the earth. I recognize that 1% protects the other 99.
Good enough. Haven't gotten to that elderly exemption yet. We'll work on that in a few more years.
Okay, any more discussion? Oh, Diane.
Diane St. Jean, Small Road. I understand we're discussing a motion, and I'm trying to understand, are we going to be voting on amending two articles, Article 17 and 19, all in one go?
No, I will suggest that we will vote on each article since in 17 we're changing not only the language but the dollar amount, so I think we should take them individually. Are we ready to vote? Anybody else?
Make a motion to move that
Move
forward to the voting
Yeah,
process.
right. So Article 17 will read as Connor has read, and it's up on the screen, to change that dollar amount from 4,000 to 2,550, and to change the wording as proposed. All those in favor, raise your card. All those opposed? Article 17, passes. So that amendment is adopted. And let's vote on the amendment on 19, which is to have the exact same wording except for the little clause that says, if you want to read that little additional clause, Connor?
This article, if passed, only takes effect if Article 17 fails to pass.
Right. Okay. All right. All in favor of that amendment to Article 19, raise your cards. Thank you. All those opposed? Okay, the amendment to Article 19 passes as well. Any other discussion on either one of these articles? If not, the 17 and 19 will appear as amended. Will the Select Board and the ABC be changing their recommendations on these two articles?
There'll be a meeting held immediately following deliberative session to consider any adjustments to their recommendations for amended articles.
Same for the ABC?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Article 18, allow Keno in Barrington. To see if the town will vote to allow the operation of Keno games within Barrington. Majority vote required. This article is recommended by the Select Board 2-1 and by the Advisory Budget Committee 5-0. George will speak about Keno.
Here I am again. I'd like to know that this program came out in 2017. The funds were to originally go for the kindergarten, but in September of 2019, it was moved to go to the General Education Trust Fund. So that's why we now tell you it's going there. On this article, the retailers in towns where it was passed noted a sales increase of 8% in their sales, and the establishments must hold a valid liquor license in order to have this machine. Now, the machine will tell you when you go to it, it makes you confirm the fact that you are 18 plus before you work at it, before you're allowed to buy tickets. Just for a short point, this goes all the way back to 1964 when we first started having the scratch cards and moving all the way up to what we have nowadays. For last year, for the year 2019, there was a total of $391 million plus that was put into the fund, and prizes that came out of that was $275 million, and I'm not reading the rest of it, which is a total of about 70.5%. And then you had operating expenses of about 11 grand. But the most important part of it is 27% of the monies collected went to the educational fund. That was $105 million went into the education fund. Now, what Keno does is allows you to come in, and if they have a restaurant that does have a liquor license, that will be that. You come in, they purchase the ticket, and they leave. It's already an established entity. As some people noted before, would bring crime to the town. No, because you already have the restaurant with a liquor license, or you just have a tap room where you go in and you have your alcohol. It's already controlled. There's nothing else to look at. But the money, it's another way of raising money. And in my opinion, it's nothing I can find in writing to verify this, but the kindergarten lost out on this. They made the change because they wanted the extra money to go to the education fund. So I for one, support this because it's very important that we use that money for education. Thank you.
Any comments by ABC? Hey, Matt.
Okay, again, Matt, I just want to address George's last comment there in terms of why the money from Keno was diverted from the kindergarten. And the reason was simply that the amount of money that Keno was raising was not enough to support kindergarten. And so in order to have a stable funding mechanism, it was added to the general education fund, but the funding for kindergarten was taken in the same way we fund education across the state. So it made it a stable funding mechanism across the entire state would have kindergarten. So it was an effort to further support kindergarten and use Keno for education, but it alone wasn't enough. And so sometimes we have it, sometimes we wouldn't, and there's no way to run a kindergarten. But that's why that was done. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator? Thank you very much. I feel that after a year, Mr. Towns, Representative Towns did not give us enough time to really focus on other towns realizing the advantage of having Keno there. So I just say to you, I thought we should have given a little bit longer before we took it out of one fund to another. Thank you.
Ken Grossman, Scruton Pond Road. Mr. Moderator, I think you described the Advisory Budget Committee vote as 5-0, and it said 3-2 on the screen, so which one was accurate?
I was probably looking at the wrong, no, it's 5-0.
It is 5, it is 5-0? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it says 3-2 on there.
At least on mine.
It's 3-2 on mine.
Yeah. So,
But the warrant is 5-0.
so can we confirm that with the Advisory Budget Committee?
It's 5-0.
It's 5-0? Okay, great. Thank you.
No.
I accept full responsibility for that error. My apologies.
Dramatic possession.
First one all day, Ben.
First one since he's been here.
Don't let that slip.
Robert Dugan, I just have a really quick question. When you say alcohol license, does that mean hard liquor or is it beer? So can a convenience store that sells beer also have Keno, or is it just the restaurants that serve hard liquor?
Pardon?
I'm speaking. You need to pay attention, George. Just kidding. Is liquor hard or beer? Can the convenience stores also sell Keno, or is it just the restaurants that have a liquor license to sell hard liquor?
The only thing I can tell you, and I understand what you're asking me, it says in the reasons for it, that you must have a liquor license in order to have the Keno machine.
Do you know if that's liquor is
It's
included
not,
here?
it's not a convenience store. It's a liquor license. There are a few other categories. I can pull up the full list.
So basically, it's just the restaurants in town that will be serving liquor, basically.
Right.
Mixed drinks.
Yes, for Barrington, yes.
Okay.
And it costs $500 a license.
Okay, any other discussion on Article 18? If not, it will appear on the ballot as written. Oh, we have a last-minute discussion.
So Carolyn Robbins, Chesley Drive. I believe this was discussed last year when we talked about the Keno. I just want to clarify. So if we do Keno and whatever money is raised with the Keno in Barrington goes towards the fund and funds education, if we do not do Keno, do we still benefit, our education still benefits? So we get money from Keno whether we have Keno or don't have Keno?
Yes, we are still
Thank you.
State your name once again, they didn't get it.
Carolyn Robbins.
John?
My opinion on this is if they don't do Keno in Barrington, they're going to do it in their surrounding towns. Why would you tell people to go to the businesses out of town when they can go and have business in town?
Okay, one more time, Tracy.
Interesting perspective. Very few people, I don't know what the percentage is, actually participate in gambling, and most often it's people that socioeconomically cannot afford to participate in it. So I think it's important what you know, but I think it's also important, again, from a policy perspective, to drill down deep into the data, which leads me to be the one select board member that was not in support of bringing this forward, although I do recognize it is absolutely our residents' decision on this.
Yes, Dan?
I've been following the news lately and stuff. Now they're gonna start online betting on the Super Bowl tomorrow and stuff, and the state's gonna start doing facilities and everything, and they're anticipating incredible amount of revenue. So.
Okay, any more? All right, once again, that's going to appear on the ballot as written, like I said before. Okay, Article 20, by petition, prevent nuclear war. This is a long one. You don't have to stand up yet, Doug, because this is going to take a while. All right, whereas 9 nations collectively have approximately 15,000 nuclear weapons, and the detonation of even a small number of these weapons would have catastrophic human and environmental consequences that would affect everyone on the planet. Whereas the United States maintains several hundred nuclear missiles on prompt launch hair trigger alert, capable of being launched within minutes of a presidential order, which greatly increases the risk of accidental or unauthorized launch. Whereas the United States continues to reserve the right to use nuclear weapons first, which would likely trigger immediate retaliation. Whereas the U.S. President has the sole and unchecked authority to order the use of nuclear weapons. Whereas over the next 30 years, the United States plans to spend an estimated $1.7 trillion to replace its entire nuclear arsenal. Whereas taxpayers already spend over $2 million every hour of every day to maintain the U.S. nuclear arsenal. Whereas the United States, as well as Britain, China, France, and Russia, are obligated under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to take concrete steps toward eliminating their nuclear arsenals. Whereas in July 2017, 122 nations approved the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which makes it illegal under international law to develop, test, produce, manufacture, or otherwise acquire, possess, or stockpile nuclear weapons or other nuclear explosive devices. Therefore, we call on the United States to lead a global effort to prevent nuclear war by renouncing the option of using nuclear weapons first, ending the sole unchecked authority of any president to launch a nuclear attack, taking U.S. nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert, canceling the plan to replace its entire arsenal with enhanced weapons, and actively pursuing a verifiable agreement among nuclear-armed states to eliminate the nuclear arsenals. We support this resolution and request the Select Board forward it to our congressional delegation. One of the petitioners, Doug Bowden, will speak about this article.
Yes, my name is Doug Bogan. I live on Scruton Pond Road, and I'd just like to provide a little background and some introduction to why this article is on the warrant. 2 years ago, in 2 weeks, there was an alert announced in Hawaii. I'm sure many of you heard about this. The alert went out to all residents of the islands. Quote, ballistic missile threat inbound. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. As you can imagine, people were quite dismayed. It actually took 38 minutes for state authorities to correct that and explain that it was a mistake. It's a very unfortunate situation, but it is the kind of false alarm that we've seen many times under the current nuclear regime. Now, 44 years previously, on the same day, Tuesday, January 13th, an accident occurred where the tail fell off a B-52 bomber, which crashed into Barrington, Maryland, with 2 nuclear weapons on board. A couple years later, and just a few days later, on January 17, 1966, an Air Force tanker and a B-52 collided over Spain, dropping H-bombs and scattering radiation. And I understand that some Seacoast residents actually participated in the cleanup of that accident, of the radiation, the contaminated soil, and so forth. And 5 years previously, on January 24th, 1961, a disintegrating B-52 releases a pair of 3.8 megaton H-bombs over Goldsboro, North Carolina. One parachutes safely. A single safety switch of 5, I believe, that are in these devices prevents it from detonating. The other falls freely and remains 180 feet underground to this day. Now, you might conclude from these incidents that January is a particularly bad time to be flying B-52s with nuclear weapons on board. But more importantly, these and other accidents and false alarms demonstrate that our nuclear weapons contingent is vulnerable to these kinds of incidents, and it's something that we need to revisit continuously, and certainly in this day and age, it's even all the more important. The fact is there have been dozens of similar accidents over previous decades, dozens of false alarms as well, many worse than the one that happened in Hawaii. In recent years, several nuclear weapons treaties have been broken. The New START treaty, the most recent one limiting strategic weapons, it expires next year, and there's no plan to renew it at this point. So this situation throughout the world and many other related ones have prompted the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists to move up their so-called doomsday clock from 2 minutes to midnight to just 100 seconds, about a minute and a half to midnight, closer than it's ever been in decades. So what does all this have to do with the town warrant article and our local voting? Well, this issue certainly affects all of us. You can't escape the power of nuclear weapons, and we all pay for it, as was mentioned in some of those warehouses. This resolution is locally sponsored. There were 43 signers to the petition, but it's based on a nationwide initiative calling on national leaders to act. The initiative is sponsored by numerous religious, peace, medical, and environmental groups around the country, and similar resolutions have already been passed by state legislatures in Maine, in California, New Jersey, and Oregon, and right in our neighborhood by city councils and town votes in Dover, Lee, Portsmouth, Durham, and Exeter. I believe 10 towns, communities throughout New Hampshire have signed on so far. So there are a lot of details, a lot of points made in the resolution, but the 5 points of action are what's important, and I urge folks to consider this and support them, and particularly that it calls for the Select Board to forward this resolution to Congress to make sure that our Congresspeople are representing the concerns of the public. So I urge you to support this resolution on the town ballot in March to help send a message for nuclear sanity in this new decade. I would mention too, there is a yellow half-page flyer on the information table. If you didn't get one, it's got a little bit more information about the resolution. So thank you.
Just as a note, these petition articles are advisory. They're asking the Select Board to do something. They don't require the Select Board or anybody else to do anything specifically. They're just asking them to express the sentiment of the voters. Carolina?
In addition to what Mr. St. Jean just said, if this is a federal issue, what good does a town warrant article do? Local warrant articles have gotten proven results impacting state and national issues. Examples are petitioned warrant articles banning large groundwater withdrawals, helping to stop USA Springs from withdrawing more than 350,000 gallons of water a day in Nottingham and Barrington. Resolutions in 20 New Hampshire towns and cities that got Governor Sununu to act on offshore wind development last year, and warrant articles in hundreds of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Vermont towns that put the successful nuclear weapons freeze campaign on the national agenda in 1982. And most of you probably don't remember, but that effort was what got President Ronald Reagan to change his mind about the threat of nuclear weapons and to sign the treaties. So I urge you to think about this, to read the yellow paper and understand the issue a little bit better. And I'm Carolina Bodner from Lois Lane.
Any other comments on Article 20? Robert?
Just have a couple comments. I know some people are in favor of nuclear weapons and some people aren't, and that's fine. A couple of things. I'd like to see this either be in favor of total or not. Down near the bottom it says we call the United States to taking U.S. nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert. And then back on the top, unauthorized launch. I know we have a president that is a little bit spontaneous on things and doesn't always think things through. But it's not like he can hit his Twitter account, like he can hit a button to do this. It goes through the Department of Defense. There's people there that authorize that. It's sent down to the missile silos. They have to verify that it's a correct one. Two of them both have to turn a switch. One of them can't go rogue and knock the other one out because one person can't reach both switches. So an unauthorized launch is pretty near impossible. Also, in Hawaii, the Hawaii issue was that had nothing to do with the nuclear program in the United States. That was an official in Hawaii that flipped the wrong switch. He wasn't notified by the federal government. That was a state issue. As far as hair trigger attack and immediate response, I served in the military for a number of years in combat, and you have to be ready to defend. You can't wait and wait for the opposing forces to build up their strength. The quicker you respond, the better defense it is. So we need to be ready, if we're going to have nuclear weapons, to be able to respond instantaneously with them, or we don't have them at all. We can't have them and then just wait for a while for Congress to approve it, because everybody knows that would take 6 months for Congress to approve anything. Thank you.
Tracy?
So I want to sum this up so that we don't, because I think time is of the essence. On the select board, some of us are involved with the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, And so the petitioned warrant articles that will go before the town of Barrington, should they be approved, we also have opportunity to present those approved petitioned warrant articles through the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. So I appreciate you bringing them forward. I appreciate how important they are to you. And I think, as with everything, I absolutely love being an SB2 community because it allows all of our town residents to respond and be a part of the process.
Doug Bogan again. I just wanted to respond to the points about the components of the resolution. The president does have sole authority. I mean, that probably made sense 50 years ago before the age of instantaneous communications. We certainly all know the power of modern communications, and that wasn't the case in past decades. It is up to the president, and I think a lot of people have come to realize whoever that president is, it shouldn't be all on one person's head to make that decision. And in terms of the hair trigger alert or prompt launch, that was set up during the Cold War when we were at, the U.S. and the Soviet Union were at each other's throats. I don't believe, despite all the rhetoric we hear about Russia, we are not at war with Russia. Currently, the major potential opponent with nuclear weapons, and to have these missiles on this quick, few minutes response just makes it all the more likely that we have a false situation, an accidental launch that could lead to Armageddon. So, we need to revisit this issue. I think most people have been lulled into thinking this isn't the problem anymore, but it clearly is, and that's what the scientists and national leaders are telling us. So I hope people will take this resolution in its entirety and express that sentiment on Election Day.
Any more comments? All right. Article 20 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 21, by petition, resolution, act on climate pollution. We, the town of Barrington, hereby call upon our state and federal elected representatives to enact carbon pricing legislation to protect New Hampshire from the costs of environmental risks of continued climate inaction. To protect households, we support a carbon fee and dividend approach that charges fossil fuel producers for their carbon pollution and rebates the money collected to all residents on an equal basis. Enacting a carbon cashback program decreases long-term fossil fuel dependence, aids in the economic transition for energy consumers, and keeps local energy dollars in New Hampshire's economy. Carbon cashback has been championed by U.S. economists, reference January 17, 2019 Wall Street Journal, as the most effective and fair way to deliver rapid reductions in harmful carbon emissions at the scale required for our safety. We expect our representatives to lead in this critical moment for the health and well-being of our citizens and for the protection of New Hampshire's natural resources upon which we all rely. The record of the vote approving this article shall be transmitted by written notice to Barrington's state legislators, to the Governor of New Hampshire, to Barrington's congressional delegation, and to the President of the United States, informing them of the instructions from their constituents by Barrington's Select Board within 30 days of this vote. Petitioner Matt Town will speak about this article.
Okay, again, thank you for allowing me to speak. Again, my name is Matt Town. I live on Stillwater Way here in Barrington. So the larger picture, this is a really upbeat subject for the end of the day, and this one and the next one, which I also sponsored. But, on Doug's issue, that is a very short-term death, where global warming is really a degenerative process that is accelerating. The original data was 60 years out, then it went to 30 years out, and now it's 10 years out for global climate change to be able to act and do anything. So we need really substantive reductions in the carbon emissions. Historically, the oil and gas industry has been heavily subsidized by your tax dollars for them to research and get more oil and gas out of the ground. What this initiative does is really try to level that playing field so that the carbon tax taxes all forms of carbon that are combusted. So not for lubrication, but just for combusted oil. And so it levels the playing field between the oil and gas industry and other more sustainable forms of energy. So this is an effort to try to level that, and all that income it's all revenue neutral. So the tax, and then the tax comes back to the citizens of New Hampshire. The point is that we have to do something. All the economists have said that this would be the most dramatic way to reduce in a sustainable way carbon footprint in the world. We're looking at a 40% decrease by if we implemented this across the country. Now this is a national initiative. The person who actually put forward was Jack Bingham, and I certainly signed on it. Jack wasn't able to be here, unfortunately. He's actually doing some solar discussions with one of my neighboring committees that they want to put in solar in their town. So I really encourage everybody to think about our own carbon footprint. We've had a lot of discussions today about solar, and this is a companion piece so that we actually start taxing oil and gas for the carbon that they contribute to our atmosphere, and ultimately cost all of us an enormous amount of money in health. Thank you.
Any other discussion on Article 21? Robert?
I just feel like talking today. I understand the purpose of this, but you also have to understand that when you tax businesses that do this, carbon, all those ones, they're just going to raise the prices, and it's going to end up hurting the consumer. Usually the lower income people, because they're the ones that can't afford the more efficient, energy efficient cars, so they have to stay with the gas cars and the other things. And they also make other things besides gasoline. So the idea may be good and may work out in the end, but just remember that it's going to come down and raise prices on most everything.
This is revenue neutral, so this income, while the taxes do take it out of the pockets, it also puts it back. The point is to make that at the point of purchase, and as a consideration that, Jesus, cost me more money, maybe I need to consider other options. So, and I do understand that this will have an impact, but if we always do what we've always done, then we're going to always get what we always got. And the fact is that what we've been doing for the last number of years is putting this in a place that nobody in this room in Greater Barrington wants to be. We don't want our atmosphere polluted. So I understand the point, but we've got to do something different.
Any other discussion? Article 21 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 22, by petition, resolution for fair redistricting. By petition of 25 or more eligible voters of the town of Barrington, New Hampshire, to see if the town will urge that New Hampshire General Court, which is obligated to redraw the maps of political districts within the state following the 2020 census, will do so in a manner that ensures fair and effective representation of New Hampshire voters. That in order to fulfill this obligation, the New Hampshire General Court shall appoint an independent redistricting commission that draws the new district maps in a way that does not rely on partisan data such as election results or party registration, or favor particular political parties or candidates. The record of the vote approving this article shall be transmitted by written notice from the selectmen to the town of Barrington, New Hampshire's state legislators, and to the governor of New Hampshire, informing them of the instructions from their constituents within 30 days of the vote. Petitioner, Matt Town.
Again, thank you. I'm really excited about this bill. We have an opportunity to really help fortify our democracy. For the last more than 30 years, according to an NHPR study, our system here in New Hampshire has been gerrymandered. And I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of politics, but the point is that some votes are worth more than others here in New Hampshire. And it isn't right when gerrymandering happens by either party. And so this redistricting commission would take the available data after the census, which is required by law, and implement a redistricting format that is bipartisan. And the last time this was passed in the House and the Senate this last year, it was a bipartisan vote. It wasn't enough to overcome a veto, but it was fully bipartisan. And so what I'm suggesting to you is that we have both Republicans and Democrats wanting to initiate this system in a way that we end up with everybody's vote counting. What will happen is the redistricting commission will, led by an outside consultant, will make the recommendations, come to a plan, make the recommendations, resubmit those back to the legislature for their approval. So it makes it a much more transparent process than historically has been the case. Typically what will happen is this happens in the back alleys and in the corridors of the State House, and it sort of happens when nobody's really aware of how it got to be the way it is. So we have an opportunity now to shine the light of day and make this truly a bipartisan effort, and we can actually get everybody's vote to count as it ought to in this state.
Any comments on Article 22? Jim Higginbottom.
Yes, Jim Higginbottom. I almost said good morning, but it's afternoon. Glad to be here. Jim Higginbottom. I'm on Daniel Cater Road. Matt asked me to consider coming up and speaking because I think the focus of this this warrant article is bipartisanship. If we consider New Hampshire's great history of being first of the primaries for the last century, Dixville Notch voters being the first votes cast in the nation in a presidential or national election, we need to consider the fairness on either side of the aisle. I am a lifelong Republican, publicly state that. Matt made a good point that this is shining the light of day on the initial elements of the voting process, and that is the districting of those votes and making each individual vote count. We could ask a lot of questions about what's important in the voting process. The ballot box, straight on up to the Electoral College, and we can debate each phase of those things. What we're talking about here is the first element of the process, and that's the individual vote counting from the individual voter. And I think this process, if properly implemented and properly evaluated, we'll have districting here in New Hampshire and hopefully in all 50 states that sets the tone for the entire voting process. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah, just real quick, I know everybody wants to go home. The system by which we decide who represents us and the geography of that doesn't make any sense. And that's a big part of this. We're currently represented in Barrington by Matt Town, Cassie Levesque, and then we share a representative with the town of Lee, and that would be Amanda Gorg. So we have half of Amanda and half of her belongs to Lee. Now, we also have a state senator who represents us, who happens to live in Dover, and he represents Barrington, Dover, and Somersworth. And so the senatorial district is completely aside from the state representative district. And I could, if it were earlier, expand on that, on the way in which the whole thing just doesn't make any sense. So aside from the partisanship of it, which you know, because every 10 years, whoever gets the most vote in the previously gets decided, we wind up with a system that doesn't make any sense. And I usually, when I run into people, whether it's in Barrington or other towns, I say, by the way, who's your state representative? And very often they don't know. And they don't know because it's confusing. And what this system will bring would be a system that was a whole less confusing, I think. So I hope we can support it.
Any other comments? Article 22 will appear on the ballot as written. Everybody's favorite, Article 23, other business, to transact any other business that may legally come before said meeting of the honorable town government. This is a good time to just make favorable comments about me friends and neighbors and stuff like that.
Good afternoon. Real quick, a lot of discussion this morning, and hopefully the people at home that may look at this video will see these comments, and the people that are here in the room that are still here. There was a lot of discussion this morning about, do we take money out of fund balance to buy down, do we use the money to buy the taxes down, or do we use it to offset the money that we're putting away for different issues? And for somebody that's been involved as a department head for a number of years in town here, I can remember back in the day, and certainly our treasurer, Peter Royce, working with the selectmen and stuff over the years, has done a lot to turn things around for us. It makes it a little tough back in the day when I first started doing this, if you put it into the perspective of from January to March, you're trying to run a department where you really were not supposed to be spending any money because money hadn't been approved to spend yet. So the town really did what they had to do, paid payroll and paid lights and stuff like this. But we could only buy equipment if it was an emergency or something like that. And then from after town meeting, when the money was approved in March, we had until about the middle of May that we could spend money, and then money started to get tight because we were waiting for taxes to come in. The treasury was going down, so we were asked not to make any big purchases, to just kind of slow down. And then once the money came in from the first half tax bill, we were able to spend our budget through until around November, and then it became the same issue again. We had to slow down or not make purchases so that we could get through. And there were times when the treasurer, Peter, would stand up and tell the selectmen that I've done all the work to do a tax anticipation note. Thankfully, we haven't done that for a lot of years because tax anticipation notes are very expensive to the town. And so, as you know, for those of us that are involved in the day-to-day operation of trying to spend your tax dollars wisely, the town selectmen and administration and treasurer have worked diligently over the last number of years to build a fund balance so that we can be in a position where we can operate in a reasonable manner and spend money more accurately spread out through the year, and more importantly, not run out of money so that either the selectmen have to make the unfortunate decisions of budget freezes or spending freezes to get through, or that the treasurer has to go to them and say, look, we got to go to the bank and borrow money to get through. So that's just a little bit of a historical perspective on why the Board of Selectmen have to make recommendations to us as voters on whether we should do something through or how it should happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Carol?
Carolyn Robbins, Chesley Drive again. I just wanted to make a statement about something that I questioned earlier. It's been kind of brewing in my head as the day has worn on. It frustrates me that someone elected to the Board of Selectmen chose to sit out and not vote for or against any of the articles on this ballot. You ran for the position, you accepted the position, you were elected to the position to do your job. And I know you have the right to vote present, but to me, that's still just not really doing your job, and it frustrates me. And you're not up for election this year, but this is something that I will certainly bring up to the public when you do come up for election. You probably, maybe, have a very good reason for it, but won't share that reason with us. So I have no other way to approach this other than feeling like you just didn't feel like doing your job, and it frustrates me. So I just wanted to make that statement, make sure that's clear in the record, and hope that everyone takes that into consideration when Mr. Ayers is up for re-election. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Any other comments? Just want to remind people that next Saturday morning across the hall is the school district deliberative session. You might be interested in the $25+ million budget. I just want to come and discuss it or find out what's involved. Okay, anything else from the board? Jay, we haven't heard from you all day. Would you like to say anything?
I told myself I wouldn't talk. Yes, but it's personal, and I probably shouldn't say it, but that's never stopped me before. I am retired, except for this town meeting and one case that I am unfortunately still stuck in. That has left me with the dubious, great fortune to watch more of the impeachment than any sane person should watch, as well as play with the grandbaby and the dog. I want to tell you that after all that impeachment stuff, it's very discouraging, it's very disheartening, and you guys have made me feel so much better. Watching true democracy and people talking and disagreeing and actually being civil, it's just fabulous. I wish you could all go to another town meeting and watch it from the outside. It's really cool. You guys are awesome.
Thanks, Mike. All right, if there's nothing else, we would entertain a motion to end the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
George moved. Who seconded? Andrew seconded. All in favor of going home? Okay. Anybody opposed to going home? All right. Thank you. Thanks for coming. See you later.
Okay.